One fateful night, I walked into an empty home, echoes of my wife's betrayal haunting every room. Kristen had vanished, leaving me for another man. The shock of her pregnancy with his child hit me like a freight train. Despair morphed into determination as I rebuilt my life from the ashes. My success became my weapon. I confronted her, not as the broken man she left, but as a force to be reckoned with. Now she's left with nothing but regret. This is my story of heartbreak, revenge, and redemption. Watch the drama unfold. Be careful what you wish for because you might just get it. My dad used to say that a lot. You know what? He was right. Just take my marriage as an example. For years, I only dreamed of marrying Kristen. I wanted a big house, kids, and a successful job where I made lots of money. Kristen wanted those things too. She dreamed of a nice life with fun and happiness. A perfect marriage to me, her high school boyfriend, a big house, and a fancy lifestyle. At first, we achieved all those dreams, but they also ended up tearing us apart. Honestly, my marriage was already over 5 years before we filed for divorce. I just didn't realize it back then. The problem started when I focused too much on what Kristen wanted. We moved to West Palm Beach so I could take a high-paying job as a bond salesman. Kristen's eyes lit up with excitement when she talked about it. She said, "Just imagine, Tyler, palm trees, beaches, and warm sunshine." She smiled widely, showing her perfect white teeth and cute dimples. "No snow," she added. I promised her it would be a great job. She hugged me tightly, and I felt surprised when her dream didn't turn out as wonderful as we thought it would be. But I never expected her to handle it the way she did. After 3 years in West Palm, things started to unravel. I thought she was just missing her family back in Grant City and needed to focus on our successful life. At that time, I was the third best bond salesman in my company, making over $250,000 each year. We had a beautiful house and 2 nice cars. Kristen had a great tan and a stylish wardrobe, but she didn't have a job and I was often away. The reason I made so much money was that I traveled a lot, flying to places like Dallas, Atlanta, and New York to sell our products to other salespeople. When I wasn't traveling, I was working long hours trying to find new clients. You get the picture. I'm Adam, and maybe I should have looked closer at what was happening at home. Kristen often complained about my long hours, but when I tried to cut back, it led to more arguments. "Can't you work a little less?" she would ask. "Sure," I'd reply, "if you can too." She knew what I meant. It was about her shopping. "I can cut back, but then we won't have as much money," I explained. This made her pout. I should have seen that clearly, but I was clueless. I suggested she find a job too. "You have a degree," I said. "Get certified to teach in Florida." But she didn't want to teach. "You know that," she'd reply, usually raising her voice. I tried to tell her getting a job would help her meet new people and make new friends. I believed it would help her feel less bored, but she wanted to have it all. She wanted me to earn money and still be home every night. She dreamed of the perfect life, but wanted a much higher lifestyle than what I could provide. I wanted to give her everything because she was the love of my life. She was my first girlfriend, and we had been together since we started dating in high school and through college. People always said we were the perfect couple, smart, attractive, and popular. We were like the king and queen of homecoming. Until we moved to West Palm, everything came easily to us. Then I entered the tough world of finance, which required hard work, long hours, and sacrifices. I was ready to make those sacrifices despite not coming from a wealthy family. My parents worked hard to give my brother and me everything we needed. They made us work too. From the time I was 14, I helped at my dad's woodworking shop, so I knew what it was like to work long hours. Kristen didn't understand this. Her dad was a bank president, and she had never worked a day in her life. I don't think her mom worked either, and her sister Priscilla never had a job. Priscilla got her teaching degree, married a lawyer, and happily stayed at home with her 4 kids. Looking back, I should have seen the signs, but I didn't. What could I do? We had been together for 11 years. She was the only one for me, and I couldn't imagine life without her. The situation got serious in year 4. Looking back, I see that I really missed my chance to save our marriage. I was packing my suitcase for a trip to Vegas when she said, "I want to go home for a few weeks." "When?" I asked. "Tomorrow," she replied. "When will you be back?" She shrugged. "I don't know, maybe a couple weeks." Come on, Kristen, you'll be gone for 10 days and I'll be here alone. I'm not getting a job, she shouted. Why not? I asked, getting frustrated. You could help. You could use your degree and maybe contribute instead of spending the money I work hard for. She looked shocked at first, then angry. Forget you. I'm going home to see my family. I'll be back when I'm back. That day turned into nearly a month. I tried calling her every day, but I didn't get to talk to her until I returned home from my trip. What are you doing that keeps you so busy? I asked. Just catching up with old friends and spending time with Scylla and the kids, she answered without much detail. I felt like my marriage was falling apart, but I was too scared to admit it. When I offered to visit her and our families, she just ignored me. I got the same cold treatment the next time she came back. About 5 months later, I returned from a work trip just before Christmas. I was excited to have the next 2 weeks off, and I had landed a big client that could lead to a promotion. I thought now was a good time to start our family. I have a big surprise for you, I told her on the phone the night before. But Kristen didn't seem very excited. All she said was, Sure, Tyler, we'll talk when you get back. But we never talked. I realized when I got home that she had already left without saying anything. 2 weeks later, my phone rang on a Sunday morning. Hello? I answered. Ty, honey, what's going on? It was my mom. Hi, Mom, Kristen's gone, I said, feeling deflated. Why didn't you say anything last week? We always talk, she replied. I don't know what's happening. I came home from a trip and she was just gone. She's back with her family, Mom said. I saw Dorothy at the store, she told me. Did she say why she left? No, just that Kristen is back home with her folks. What are you going to do? My dad's voice came in on another line. I don't know, Dad. What can I do? Fly up there and beg her to come back? You have to do something, Dad insisted. No, Dad, I don't. She made her choice already without talking to me. So that's it? You're just going to give up? He pushed. I'm not giving up, I said, getting angry. I came home from a trip, I got promoted, and I wanted to tell her I could work less so we could start a family. Then I walked into an empty house. She took most of the furniture, and I'm left with the love seat. Oh, honey, I could hear my mom's sadness. Dad said, chasing her to Grant City wouldn't help. She won't even answer your calls. A week later, I received papers saying Kristen wanted a divorce. I guess that means she wanted to move on. The divorce was filed where we were from, in Lincoln County, Illinois, but I decided to move it to Palm Beach County, Florida. This made her mad, and she hired a tough lawyer. But my lawyer was even tougher, and she lost in court. The divorce was straightforward since we didn't have a lot of debt, and there were no kids involved. The lawyers worked it out without needing the judge's help, especially since she had taken the furniture. She was told to pay for the credit cards that bought that furniture. That money came from her fair share of the house we owned together, which sold for a great price 2 months after she left in the hot Florida housing market. The only thing the judge had to decide was alimony. So Kristen had to fly down and be in court for 1 session. Honestly, the heavy Midwestern food didn't seem to be working for her. She looked a bit fuller than I remembered, maybe 15 pounds heavier, and she definitely had a look that said she disliked me. Kristen wanted $4,000 a month for 3 years, and then they would check again. I didn't want any alimony at all. The judge, a cranky old man with tufts of gray hair coming from his head, ears, nose, and eyebrows, and a voice like sandpaper, laughed at Kristen's request and gave me a pitying look when I said I wouldn't pay anything. He agreed to give her 1 year of $2,000 a month, and after that, I wouldn't owe her anything else. Whatever. That was less than 10% of my take-home pay. When the bailiff called for a break to end our case, Kristen stormed out of the courthouse without saying a word. Priscilla shot me a fired-up look and hurried after her sister. I stood there, feeling just as lost as I had been when I walked into my empty home just 3 months before. No note, no email, no voicemail. When I tried to call her, she wouldn't talk to me. After 10 years together, I didn't even get an explanation. Was I angry? No, I was tired, confused, and worn out from the whole mess. What happened? Without her telling me, I was left to guess. Maybe she felt lonely and was away from her family. Maybe she felt lonely with me because I was always working. She wanted a family, but I wasn't ready. The sad part is that most of her loneliness would have been gone the moment I found out she left. We could have built that family now. I would be home almost all the time. We could have been together more, but it seemed like it was too late. So there I stood, exhausted, watching the courtroom door close behind my ex-wife. The only woman I ever loved. The only woman I ever wanted to be with. I felt someone's hand on my shoulder. It was the judge. His voice was soft, as if he could sense my deep sadness. "It'll get better. Just give it time." I could only nod, not trusting myself to speak without crying. Suddenly single, though not by choice, I felt there were 3 paths I could take. First, I could go out and prove I was still a good guy. To do that, I would have to spend all my time trying to meet women. This idea did sound fun. Of course, I would be exploring new experiences, which was tempting, but what if I failed and looked silly? Second, I could dive into my work, making more money than I needed, but I wouldn't have any time to find a life outside of it. I had worked hard to pay the bills and to give Kristen what I thought she wanted. My dad used to say, "Do you want to work to live or live to work?" Since I was now earning over $300,000 a year, I decided I wanted to work to live. Third, I could just forget everything and move away, starting a new life. That idea was also appealing. Who wouldn't want to leave all the bad behind and start fresh in a place where nobody would remind me of my failure in marriage? It felt like an adventure. After thinking about it, at least for the time it took to drink 2 margaritas, I decided I would do all 3. I would work hard and go somewhere new. I wanted to go back to my college major, English, instead of sales or finance. You'd be surprised at how many people in sales studied English. Other than teaching, what else can you do with an English degree? I wanted to write. I loved it in high school and college, but never had the time because of my marriage and work. Now seemed like the perfect chance to focus on writing and take my mind off things. So I decided to write in my free time. When I faced writer's block, I would go out to clubs and meet women. But no relationships. I was an emotional mess, and the thought of getting closer than just having fun made me feel uneasy. Still, I was ready for some fun. I started that very night. I'll never forget it. Most people spend the day of their divorce partying or trying to meet new people. But I spent the afternoon in my apartment, brainstorming story ideas. What if this happened? What if that happened? What if a man's wife leaves him for no reason, disappears, and no one knows where she is? He would be lost without her, consumed with finding her and wondering if she had been hurt, taken, or just left. Let's say this man is a bond salesman. No, too boring. How about a private investigator? Too cliché. Oh, I'm close. How about a sheriff? Yes. A small-town deputy sheriff struggling with his job and life, where the only bright spot is his wife, who always seemed too good for him. That was close. What about a police lieutenant? After all, it seemed unlikely that a sheriff could take off a whole month to search for his wife. But where would he live and work? How about Rockford, Illinois? It's a bigger city with about 150,000 people. It's around 40 miles from Grant City. That seemed like a better idea. This is how everything began, thinking about what-ifs while dealing with my own messy situation. What if the only woman you ever loved decides she doesn't love you anymore? Or what if she loves someone else more? Or maybe she never really loved you at all? 2 months into writing my story, Mom called out of the blue on a Tuesday night. She said she was getting married. "Kristen?" I asked, shocked. It felt like she had moved on too quickly. Mom confirmed it was Randy Walters, the cop. "That didn't take long," I said. "I guess it started even before she left you," Mom replied. "That's the rumor anyway. They were seeing each other when she visited her family here." My mom paused and then said quickly, "And she's pregnant." I couldn't believe it. I felt cold and angry. "Say something, honey," Mom said. "What is there to say?" I replied. Dad jumped in. "Forget her." "Edwin," Mom gasped. Dad almost never swore around Mom unless he was really angry. "No, Mom," I said, clenching my teeth. "Dad's right. Forget her." The phone was quiet for a moment after Mom gasped again at my words. "So what do Dorothy and Laverne think about their little princess now?" I asked. "They're upset," Mom replied. "Laverne is still acting like he's better than everyone." Dad spoke up. "But he's pretending. You saw it. Dorothy couldn't even look people in the eye when she talked about it." "Good," I said. "It's nice to see Kristen hurting someone besides me." "No, Tyler, that's not good," Dad said softly. "It's bad enough she hurt you, but making her family embarrassed is worse." "What's embarrassing?" I argued. "She's back home and they can see her all the time, and now they have a baby with Randy Walters." My anger was boiling. They can keep telling her she's special and letting her do whatever she wants. You're hurting, Tyler, Mom said. We know that. But don't let your anger turn into hate. Please don't do that. Remember, what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. Or it rots us from the inside, Dad added. But I didn't feel rotten. I felt that Kristen was the one who was rotten. I was just the fool who ignored all the signs. I was the one pretending everything was fine, even when it was spoiled. At least I knew my support payments would end before the year was over. Mom's new marriage would cut off my payments. I couldn't help but think, so there you go, Kristen. Think about that. After that phone call, my story took a much darker turn than I planned. 2 months later, I wrote like a man on a mission. Every night from 6 to midnight and from 10 to 4 or 5 on weekends, I finished the outline of my first novel. I wrote character descriptions while I worked on the outline, and they kept growing as I wrote more. Then, one night at 10:30, after 9 months since she left me, I realized I hadn't been with anyone in a long time. I hadn't even thought about dating. But now, I felt ready to start fresh. It seemed too late to go out, but West Palm has a lot of nightclubs and young people. The under-25 crowd didn't show up until after 9, so I thought I might have a chance. A little after that, I found myself at Matt's, a sports bar and dance club. The parking lot was packed. I moved through the doors and smiled at a few attractive women. At least 3 of them were wearing wedding rings, which almost made me want to leave before I even had a drink. Finally, with beer in hand, I found a table near the dance floor. I could at least watch everyone else dance, even if they were all out of rhythm with the girls who seemed lost in their own world. But watching those girls dance made me realize something important. How do I ask someone out? I remembered that the only person I ever asked out was Kristen, almost 12 years ago in high school. After that, I didn't need to talk to anyone else. Sure, there were a few harmless flirts at work, but we all knew it wouldn't lead to anything. Suddenly, a cool voice with a soft southern accent broke into my thoughts. Hello? I turned to see a woman smiling at me. I probably looked shocked. She chuckled at my expression and motioned to the empty chair across from me. I glanced between the chair and her, then stood up quickly, almost knocking over the table. Oh, sorry. Yes, please, I said. She didn't try to hide her laughter. First time here? She asked, as she sat down in the chair across from me. I nodded. I'm Susan, she said, reaching her hand out over the table. Tyler, I replied, shaking her cool, surprisingly strong hand. She was tall and beautiful, with long, shiny black hair framing her lovely face. Her high cheekbones and full lips matched her bright green eyes, which sparkled under the dance lights. She looked about my age, around 28, maybe a little more or less. Her body was fit, like a high school cheerleader with well-defined muscles. Her bright green dress showed off her smooth skin and perfect figure. Those green eyes were now studying me. So, Tyler, she said, taking a sip of her drink through a straw while looking straight at me, what brings you out tonight? She was direct, which surprised me. It seemed clear what she wanted, and she was boldly trying to see if I wanted the same thing. I wasn't sure that I did. How long have you been divorced? She asked. That obvious? I replied, a bit taken aback. Afraid so, she said. 6 months. I sighed and continued. 9 months since she left. 6 since the divorce was final, and this is my first time out since... I nodded, thinking about whether I should leave before I embarrassed myself more. Most people come out within a week of divorce, Susan said. You waited 6 whole months? Hell, 9, actually. Yeah, well, I'm not really ready for this, I said, feeling nervous. Been a long time since you've done this, right? She asked. I nodded. And you have no idea what to do anymore, right? Right, I said, feeling unsure. Okay, she said, finishing her drink and pushing it away. Here's how it goes. You're pretty good looking, okay? I just stared at her, not sure what to say. I don't have a lot of time, she continued, so I'm going to be simple. Do you want to leave this place with me? My eyes widened. It was that easy? Just show up alone and a stunning woman would pick me up? She laughed, a warm, rich sound. I guess we could do the formal stuff, she said. You buy me a few drinks and I pretend to be hard to get for a little while. Then we dance, starting with fast songs. When the slow song hits, I'll let you know I'm interested. You like that idea? Well, What do you prefer? I asked, surprised. She laughed again and stood up. This is going to be fun, she said, holding her hand out for mine, just like with someone who has never done this before. She didn't know how close to the truth that was. Let's not waste any time, she said. I have to get up early, so let's go. We drove in separate cars to my place. Once inside, she looked around. Nice! Better than most single guys' places, especially divorced ones. As she spoke, I watched her slide her dress off her shoulders. Well? She asked, looking at me. I could only stare at her amazing body, now only covered in a tiny white lace bra and matching panties, plus high-heeled sandals. Her smile was playful. She walked toward me, but I was too shocked to move. You can say something, she said, leaning in and whispering close to my ear. I won't bite. A few minutes later, she got up. Well, she said, picking up her clothes while I lay on the couch, still watching her. I guess that was fun, I said awkwardly. She smiled at me. I don't usually do this. I have to leave early, she said. Leave? Who did I thought, feeling confused. I'm a lawyer, she said. A lawyer? I asked, surprised. Don't give me that look, she said. You know what it's like. Meaning what? I replied. Meaning, she said, gesturing to the piles of papers on my dining room table. We both have demanding jobs. I don't have time for a relationship, but that doesn't mean I don't have needs. I smiled, feeling a bit better. I'm not judging you, Susan. Really? Then why the look? She asked, relaxing again. I'm just surprised, I said. You're beautiful, and now I find out you're smart and successful too. I guess I didn't expect that. She nodded, smiling. She straightened her dress and leaned over me. Tyler, if you're going to play this game, be ready for surprises. Then she kissed me on the lips. So this is it, she said. Maybe we'll meet again. Maybe not. We'll see. I nodded, feeling both sad and relieved at the same time. Sad because it felt cheap and empty, but relieved that she didn't want anything more from me. It took another month before I felt brave enough to go out again. During that time, I spent all my free hours at home writing. I had been working on a novel. Once I finished the outline, the writing came easily. I was filling in details and conversations quickly. After a month, I had nearly finished my first book. But then my physical needs came back. One Saturday afternoon, after hours at my computer, my thoughts turned to sex. My excitement for writing faded as my needs took over. I saved my work and backed it up before heading to the shower, but the shower didn't help at all. The images of intimacy, both with Kristen and more clearly with Susan, made my heart race. I didn't want to embarrass myself again if I tried to flirt with someone. So, I took care of things in the shower and hoped that would help. An hour after my shower, I was still feeling excited. I decided not to fight it. I put on some khaki pants and a light blue shirt, then wore sandals. I headed back to meet Matt, getting straight to the point. I spent about 3 hours there buying drinks and dancing. When I left, I was again with a lovely girl named Sophia Martinez. That night was amazing. It ended when she kissed me, thanked me, and left around midnight. The next morning, while sipping coffee, I looked out at the gray ocean and sky from my apartment, thinking about my love life. I had a few thoughts immediately. First, being single is a lot different from being married. When you are single, intimacy is more about yourself. I wanted to feel good, and so did Susan and Sophia. Second, there was a lot more guidance in those moments. They both said many times, just like that, or right there. And of course, things moved faster. After being with Kristen many times, I didn't need to guide her. She knew what I wanted, and I knew how to get what I liked. Third, even with that focus on ourselves, there was also a bit of uncertainty. I often wondered if I did something. Would it upset them? Would I ruin the mood? Fourth, I really disliked using condoms. Kristen and I only used them in the beginning. After she started taking the pill, we didn't worry about anything for years. Now, though, I had to use them. Let's be honest. Everyone was being unfaithful, and the thought of diseases kept me aware of needing to protect myself. Finally, it all felt so impersonal. It seemed like each of us was just a body for pleasure, used and then forgotten. The experience was enjoyable, but the feelings afterward almost canceled out all the fun. Would I ever get used to this? On the flip side, I wasn't ready to look for a serious girlfriend or a real relationship anytime soon. After finishing my second cup of coffee, I realized what I wanted. My life was good right now. A bit lonely, yes, but still good. My book was coming along well, work was busy, and I was getting casual encounters to relieve stress. If this kind of intimacy with strangers was what it took for everything else in my life to go well, I could accept that. I decided to keep my Saturday nights free for myself and focus on meeting new people. Maybe I'd get used to it. Maybe I wouldn't. If it became too much, I could always stop. What a change this was. A year ago, I had a committed relationship with one woman for the rest of my life. I won't deny that she was attractive, so that thought didn't exactly upset me. But wild and exciting moments with many beautiful women seemed like a dream for a guy, right? Now that I had it, it wasn't all I expected. But it was still better than being alone. 5 months and many nights filled with enjoyment later, I had finished my first novel. It was over 350,000 words about a man's difficult journey to find out where his partner went and why. It was part mystery, part betrayal, and part thriller. If that sounds confusing, it's because I packed a lot into this story, and it wasn't just a first draft. I had gone through it twice, fixing mistakes, tightening the scenes, and adding more details wherever needed. One Saturday evening after 7, I stared at my screen. What now? I asked myself, really unsure of what to do next. Going out for a random night with another girl didn't interest me. The idea didn't even excite me anymore. Honestly, I was done with that. I couldn't even remember half of their names after Susan and Sophia. There had been a redhead, a brunette, and another Cuban girl, among others. But I never saw the same girl twice. Looking for casual encounters was no longer on my list. I faced a bigger question. I had written a book. Now what? I had no idea. By the weekend's end, I started searching online. I made a list of steps to find a way to share my story that had taken 13 months to write. First on the list was to find an agent. Publishers rarely look at stories sent cold, so I needed someone to read my book and, if they liked it, help me find a publisher. The next week, I wrote cover letters to about 20 agents in New York, Miami, and Los Angeles. Each letter had a copy of my manuscript. I won't even say how much it cost to print 40 copies. Let's just say I could have bought a stock in Kinko's and made a fortune. After that, I started writing another novel. This time, it didn't flow as easily. I spent nearly a month working on ideas until I was ready to outline the new story. At the end of that month, despite receiving 11 rejection letters from several agents, I decided to go out, not to find a partner, but just to eat, enjoy a few margaritas, and watch people have fun. Still alone? I heard a voice say behind me as I took a sip of my second margarita. I didn't need to look back to know who it was. "How are you, Susan?" I asked. "Very good," she replied, sliding between the chairs and sitting down across from me. "And I thought you'd forget me." I smiled. "Hard to forget your first time," I said, and she laughed. I waved to a waitress, pointed to Susan, and then to my empty glass. The waitress nodded and hurried away to get our drinks. "Thank you," Susan said. She looked much the same as when I had seen her months ago. Her body was just as impressive, now dressed in a tight white dress. Her dark hair seemed a little straighter and a little shorter, but it was still the same Susan. "So, what brings you here?" I asked, grinning as I raised my eyebrows. "Probably the same thing that brings you," she said with a smile and a shrug. I shook my head. "Not this time. I'm a little tired of that." Her eyebrows raised, showing she didn't quite believe me. "Seriously, I guess I'm not really that way," I said. "You seem fine to me," she replied. "Don't tell me you've turned away from the whole thing," I laughed. "Oh no, I've had my share and they were good. But I don't know, I guess it's just not for me." Her expression softened, and she leaned over the table, placing her hand on mine. "It's pretty obvious," she said. "You're one of the good ones, you know." "How so?" I asked. "You're marriage material. You can't just keep going from one woman to another. You need something more. And you could see that after just one evening." She nodded. "Even before we left here." "Wow, you remember my name?" I said, surprised. She laughed, but it wasn't a cheerful laugh. "I don't remember a lot of names, but yours stuck with me." I felt good about that. "You were that good," she said, a mix of joy and regret in her eyes. Our drinks arrived, and we sat quietly for a moment, sipping while we watched the dance floor. "Don't you have any friends around here?" she asked out of the blue. I paused, considering how to answer. "Just some people I work with. We go out sometimes after work. Maybe a few house parties." She shook her head. "Not like that. I mean real friends, not just coworkers you chat with about work." I sighed. "Guess not." "That's pretty sad," she said. "You're a nice guy, easy to talk to. You should have buddies to watch football with, go hunting, things like that." I shook my head. "Nope." "That's a shame," she said. "So what do you do when you're not working, besides looking for women?" "I write," I said. "I just finished a book about a month ago." "You write?" "That's interesting," she said, looking me over. "When can I read this book?" I laughed. "Probably never. I don't think anyone will want to publish it." "Then why write it?" she asked. "Because I like writing more than hanging out with people," I replied. As I thought about it, I realized I had gone from having real friends in high school and college to being alone. I had lost touch with everyone. When I was married, Kristen was enough. Between work and home, I didn't have much time to make friends. Now, after living in Florida for over 6 years, I didn't have a single friend for hundreds of miles. "Sorry," Susan said after a moment of silence. I tried to smile. "No, it's okay. Just made me think about a few things." She offered a sad smile. "It isn't going so well, is it?" I smiled back. "It's going fine, really. Let me get you another drink if you have time." "Sure," she said. I waved for fresh drinks, and the waitress was back quickly. "So, you were going to be a lawyer?" I asked, breaking the quiet. "Do you know any agents? Maybe one who would at least give my book a chance?" I knew I was pushing it, but it felt worth a try. She looked thoughtful, then her eyes lit up and a grin spread across her face. "I might know someone," she said, "but what's in it for me?" "I told you I'm out of that game," I replied. "Then what will you give me to make it worth my while?" she asked. "Money?" She shook her head. "I have enough of that." "My thanks," I offered. "Not good enough," she said, raising an eyebrow. "What about dinner?" I suggested. "You've already eaten," she shot back. "What's it going to cost me?" "Just tonight?" I asked, surprised. She feigned an exaggerated look of pain. "Am I really that bad?" I smiled. "You know better." "It's just that the weekend," she said, fixing her gaze on me, "starts right now." "But it's already Saturday night," I replied. "I mean, I want to sleep in your bed and wake up next to you," she said. "I want to know what that feels like." "Okay," I said. "And then spend tomorrow with you through dinner," she added. "But you could get that from many guys here," I protested. "But you're not like them," she countered. "I don't feel cheap with you. I want to know what a guy like you thinks of me, someone who sees me as more than just a body." I paused, thinking about her words. "I see," I said slowly. She shook her head, looking a bit sad. "Sorry, but my life hasn't changed much. I'm still traveling half the time and busy when I'm home." "So I'm not dating material?" I asked, trying to understand. "No, I just want to know, even for a day, what I'm missing out on," she replied. I thought about what she said. Truthfully, I felt sorry for her. She was doing well. You could tell by her nice jewelry and dress, which must have cost a lot. She was also on her way to becoming a lawyer, probably working at a big firm with important clients and tough cases. She had reached her goals, but now she wondered what it had cost her. Honestly, I would have been okay with her staying the night without expecting anything in return. But if she was willing to help me in any way, did that make me a bad person? I noticed she was awake. Her breathing was soft and steady. She lay on her side, facing me, her long black hair covering her face and the pillow. I could still see her face, though, and I watched as her lips moved and her eyes squeezed shut. "Please tell me you're not watching me." "I'm not watching you," I replied. She opened her eyes and called me a liar. "You're just as beautiful this morning as you were last night," I told her. She rolled her eyes, showing her disbelief. "I'm serious," I said. "You look so peaceful and calm." Her face relaxed. Then I added, "But let's just say you did some loud snoring last night. It was like sleeping next to a bear." "Ouch!" She playfully hit the side of my head. "Be careful, Buster." We both laughed. I leaned in to kiss her, but she moved back, saying, "No, I have morning breath." Suit yourself, I said, getting out of bed and heading to the bathroom to wash away the effects of the 4 margaritas I had the night before. As I brushed my teeth, she asked, "Mind if I join you?" I turned to see her at the door, wearing one of my old sweatshirts and nothing else. I nodded for her to come in. "There's a spare toothbrush in here," I said, opening a drawer to show her the 5 toothbrushes inside. "Someone has a serious toothbrush obsession," she joked. "Tell me about it," I said, and we shared a laugh. She was cleaning her teeth while I shaved, and then we took a shower together. It was lovely. Did we spend the whole day having fun? Not quite. Instead, we walked along the beach and grabbed burgers from a little beach stand for lunch. Later, we returned to my apartment for a nap. We both needed it, and I wrapped my arms around her as we slept. 2 hours later, she stirred, waking me from a deep sleep filled with happy dreams. It felt good to wake up. When I opened my eyes, I noticed a sad look on her face as she sat on the bed. "Do you ever think about the choices you've made in life?" she asked. "Every day," I replied. "Not just the small things," she continued, "but the big decisions." "Like what?" I asked. "I know exactly what you mean," I told her. "I've spent the last year and a half wondering if my good job and high pay are truly worth it." She nodded, a look of understanding on her face before sadness returned. "This was a mistake," she said. "Why?" "Because," she replied, "before last night I had these little feelings that there was more to life than just my job. Maybe a family, a husband I love, waking up with someone I love and spending a day like we just did." A tear rolled down her cheek as she spoke. I sat up and gently stroked her back. "But now I see what I'm missing," she went on. "It feels like I know what I could have, but I can't really have it." "It's not too late, you know," I said softly. "You can still have those things. You're only what, 26? 27? "I'll be 30 in 3 weeks, she replied. 30 is the new 20, I said, pulling her closer to me. "I don't know you very well, but I do know a few things about you." "Like what?" she asked, settling back against me as I wiped her tears away. "I know you can achieve anything if you set your mind to it. You've done that in your career, right?" She nodded. "So you can learn to slow down and give yourself a chance to meet someone special." "It's not that easy," she said. "I know it's not," I agreed. "But it might mean you'd need to work somewhere else, where people don't push themselves too hard every day. But those places do exist, don't they? Even for lawyers, I guess." She laughed softly. "You make it sound easy," she said, her voice quiet. I was quiet for a moment. "It's not easy," I finally said. "If it were, I would have done it in my own life." "Is that why you're divorced?" she asked. I wasn't sure how to answer. I still didn't understand why Kristen left. Was it because I worked too much or because of Randy Walters and their new baby? I couldn't tell. "I don't really know," I finally said. "In part, I guess. Probably a big part, but it wasn't just that." Susan turned to face me, kissed me, and pulled me into a tight hug. "Well, she made a huge mistake," she said. "Tyler. It's Collins," I corrected. "Tyler Collins, and I'm Karapova." "Susan Sharapova," she introduced herself. I gasped playfully. "You mean I'm sleeping with a communist?" She giggled, burying her face in my neck and pulling me close. "The wall came down a while back," she said. "Phew," I replied. "Just saying." Her giggle grew louder. I made us a cheese omelet and toast for dinner. We ate in a comfortable silence until the phone rang. It was Mom. I thought I had missed her call that morning. "Hello, Tyler?" Dad's voice came through shaky. "What's wrong?" I asked. "Your mother," he said. She's in the hospital." "What?" I asked, feeling panic rise in my chest. He tried to say no, but the words didn't come out. "I'll call him," I said. "I'll get there as fast as I can." "Hurry," he replied. "Please, I promise." But then he hung up. "What's wrong?" Susan asked as I turned to her. "My mom?" I said, feeling scared and choked up. She seemed quick to act during a crisis. "Benny, your brother?" I nodded. "Call him," she said, pulling out her phone and heading to the bedroom. "I'll book you a flight and help you pack," she added. "Chicago," I said. She looked back at me, puzzled. "Fly me to Chicago. It's only an hour away." She nodded and started dialing numbers on her phone, then headed back to the bedroom. "Your book?" Susan asked while driving me to the airport. "What?" I replied, confused. "Your book," she repeated. "Where is it?" I just stared at her, not understanding. She focused on driving, but her face softened. I promise to get your book to an agent, she said. I want to keep my end of our deal. You're kidding, right? I said. My mom's in trouble. That's way more important. She shook her head. I know this is serious, but while I'm here, I want to help you, Tyler. Something to maybe take your mind off things. Tears filled her eyes. I don't know what else I can do. I just want to... There are copies in my den, I said, reaching for my keys. I pulled out the key for the front door. They're in a box next to the computer. It's called Long Gone. She nodded, wiping her tears and trying to smile. Okay, she said. I'll see what I can do, thanks. And give me your cell phone, she added. Why? I asked. I'll save my number in it. Why not just give me your number? I can do it while you drive, I suggested. She handed me her number and I typed it in. You want my number too? I asked. She nodded quickly, a little nervous to ask. She handed me her iPhone and I added my number. 10 minutes later, Susan helped me through the security lines. I hope everything gets better, she said, hugging me tightly. Me too, I choked out, hugging her back just as hard. This is some date, she said, tears in her eyes. I wiped her tears away with my thumb. Thanks for everything, I said. You saved me tonight, maybe even my whole life. I kissed her, got in line, and didn't look back. I couldn't trust myself to look back. It was almost 2 in the morning when I drove my rental car into Grant City. Since Dad wasn't answering at home, I went straight to the hospital. Dad, Benny, and Benny's wife, Maureen, were all in the waiting room. They got up when they saw me, and we hugged each other. It's a stroke, Benny said as we hugged. How bad? I asked. I don't know yet, Dad said. They're running tests. It'll take a while to know. I nodded and turned to Benny and Maureen. Where are the kids? I asked. My sister has him, Maureen said. She'll keep him until we know what's happening. That was all we could say. No one wanted to voice their fears. A little after 4, a doctor walked into the waiting room. He looked tired and maybe a few years older than me. How is she? Dad asked, quickly standing up. The news is not good, the doctor said. It was a serious stroke. What does that mean? Benny asked. Is she going to be okay? The doctor looked at us and sighed. She'll live, but it's going to be hard. I don't care, Dad said. The doctor continued. She'll have some serious issues, paralysis on her right side and trouble talking. She'll need a lot of therapy for speech and movement. But that will fix everything, right? Dad asked, fear in his eyes. The doctor shook his head. Not completely. Some things will be permanent. Dad looked defeated, like a balloon slowly losing air. Don't get me wrong, the doctor added quickly. She's still sharp, and with time she'll talk again, though not as fast as before. She'll walk again, but with a limp. Dad looked up, hope in his eyes. The doctor put his hand on Dad's knee. She'll get better, Dad. I put my hand on Dad's shoulder, trying to reassure him. She's a fighter. Dad tried to laugh through his pain. She is that, he agreed. She'll get better, just wait and see. But the doctor's face showed doubt, even if he didn't say it. 2 days later, Benny, Maureen, and I sat at the dining room table sipping coffee. Dad was at the hospital making plans for Mom to go to a care center for intense therapy. I noticed Benny and Maureen exchanging glances, Maureen raising her eyebrows and nodding at me. What? I asked, looking at her. Just say it. Benny cleared his throat. Well, Ty, someone needs to stay here for a while. Maureen added, Dad can't take care of himself. I can't cook, Benny said. And he probably doesn't know how to do laundry either, Maureen added. He'll be really busy going to therapy. Guys, I said, I know. You don't have to convince me. Benny started to say something, but then stopped, unsure of how to go on. I've got a lot of time off coming, I said. He looked relieved. Don't worry, I added. I'll be around for a bit. Maureen spoke up. You were always better in the workshop. The workshop? I asked. Benny explained, someone needs to keep filling the orders. Dad can't just stop everything. At least I don't think they have much saved up. I hadn't really thought about that before, but it made some sense. Somebody had to make the cabinets, tables, and chairs. They were right. Benny would not last a week. He was a total klutz. You're right, I said. When Dad got home that night, we went out to the pole barn that served as his workshop for the cabinet-making business. For that matter, you'll need to keep orders filled, I said as we walked. Yeah, Benny sighed, not very interested. Why don't you show me what needs to be done and I'll start tomorrow? He stopped and looked at me closely. I had his attention. You still remember how to do any of this? He asked. It will come back to me, I promised. He frowned, thinking it over. I'll stay home tomorrow and watch you, he decided. I want to see if you still know what you're doing. I smiled. That sounds fair. Benny, Animo can be with your mom. She'll like that and give you a break. He nodded and we walked to the workshop. We looked over the orders to be filled, the plans to finish, the billing to do, and all the other tasks needed to run a small business. After spending 6 years dealing with much bigger numbers, the business side didn't scare me, but looking at some pieces waiting to be finished filled me with awe. The tight joins and smooth designs of the furniture made me sweat. The handmade dovetails on the drawers and cases frightened me. I hadn't made a hand-cut dovetail joint in over 7 years, but I remembered how hard it had been to learn. Maybe we could hire someone, I thought. Sam, I said into the phone, I need some serious time off. What? He sounded shocked, just as I knew he would. Sam Runyon was a high-up guy at McDaniel Smith, and the idea of time off was hard for him to accept. It's my mom, I explained. She had a stroke. Is she okay? He asked, still sounding gruff. No, Sam, she's not okay. She's really not doing well. She's not going to die, right? No, she's not going to die, I said. Then what's the problem? My dad needs someone there until she gets out of therapy. How long will that be? About a month? A month? He groaned, sounding both sad and unable to believe it. Maybe longer, I added. More than a month, he cried. This is a lot, Collins, really. That made me angry. I had put my all into this place, and now he was mad at me. I had to take care of my family. You've got to be kidding, I said, biting my tongue. I can't avoid this. I need to talk to my boss, he said. It's not that easy. I mean, you need a week, okay? Sure, take it. 2 weeks? We should be able to cover for a month. I'm not asking you, Sam, I said, my voice getting firmer. I'm telling you. He paused, probably surprised I was challenging him. Do you know what you're saying? He asked. Maybe you're giving up your job. You want to do that? I don't have a choice, I replied. This is my family, not just some sick animal. So what do we do when you're gone? Who's going to cover for you? That's not my concern, I said. It sure is your concern, Collins. You're in charge here. So I should just say sorry and hope everything works out? I shouted. Be sure to keep in touch at Christmas. Hope your mom gets better. Is that what I should do? I don't care what you do, Collins, he snapped, getting angry. It's not my problem, not McDaniel, Smith's problem. Got it? Clear as day, Sam, I said before I even thought it through. And Bonds isn't my concern right now either. What does that mean? He demanded. I paused to think. They had already caused a lot of trouble in my life, and now they wanted me to just leave my family behind. That means 2 things, Sam, I said. First, I'm resigning right now. I heard him gasp. He found his calm again. You said 2 things. The second thing is my severance pay. I want $250,000. You must be crazy, he shouted. You're quitting. We're not firing you, and you're leaving with no notice. Read my contract, Sam, I said. We're 9 months into the year, and I've earned 60 days of vacation you can't deny me. You'll pay me for that time, plus that $250,000 as severance. And if you refuse? He knew better than to push me. First, I'll just take my 60 days of vacation, and there's nothing you can do about it. Then I'll come back. For the last 30 days I've been thinking about leaving, and now I have. The year is over, and because of that, I expect my bonus. Next, I'll call Carl from Midlands Financial and tell him I'm leaving you guys. I'll tell him why I could help them find better people. You wouldn't dare, he said, shocked at my plan. Oh, I absolutely would. I told him he owed me at least $190 for my bonus, and they would still make money from Midlands after I left. He said he'd think about it. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. That was quick, Sam, I said. It's not Sam, said a deep voice on the line. It's Bertram Mac Reynolds. I was surprised. The head of McDaniel Smith was calling me. There seems to have been a misunderstanding, Tyler, he said. How so, sir? I asked him. I think Mr. Runyon might have rushed things, maybe been a bit too harsh. I smiled and chose to stay quiet. Are you still there? He asked. Yes, I'm here, sir. What I'm saying, Tyler, is that you have 60 days of vacation. You've worked hard, and if you want time to be with your family, you can take it. Your job will still be here when you return, okay? I'm not sure, Mr. Mac Reynolds, I replied, thinking about how confident he was. I speak for this company, Mr. Collins, he said firmly. Then he softened his tone. We're really sorry to hear about your mother. We do not turn our backs on our employees when they need help. So please, take the time off if you need it. Sorry, sir, I said. I'm not coming back. I could almost see Sam Runyon sitting with Mac Reynolds, looking worried. But here's what I was willing to do. If they approved my severance package, I would help keep Midlands on track during the change. Let's be honest. Bertram Mac Reynolds didn't care about me or my mom. He just wanted to keep Midlands successful. All right, Tyler, he said tiredly. We're listening. I told him, you can pick my replacement, then send them and Sam to meet me in Chicago. I'll go with them to Midlands and introduce myself. I'll tell them why I'm leaving, even if you did your best to help me. I'll make sure they still think highly of you. I could hear whispering on the other end. Then Mac Reynolds said, I'm not sure Mr. Runyon is the best choice to come with you. I knew what he would say, so I wanted to help Sam. He had always been fair to me, even if he worked me hard for 6 years. But he was loyal to the company, and I understood how he would feel about my time off. Mr. Mac Reynolds, I said, Sam Runyon is a great boss. I'm not upset with him. Our earlier fight doesn't matter. He's good at what he does. Mac Reynolds cleared his throat. Are you sure you won't change your mind, Tyler? I'm sure, sir, I replied. There was more quiet talking on the other end. We'll have the vacation pay sent to your bank by the end of the day, he said, and we'll email you a severance agreement to look over. We'll pay you the rest after the trip to Midlands. Half now and half later, I asked, and make sure the trip happens within 45 days. Smart man, he laughed. It's a deal. I agree, sir, I said. And Tyler, we are really sorry about your mother and sad to see you go. Thank you, sir. 2 weeks later, I spent Thursday and part of Friday in Minneapolis getting the Midlands account for my old company. By Monday, I saw the last of my severance pay in my account. So what would I do now? I had no idea. But the phone call had settled my money worries for a while. With my savings, stocks, and pay, I had nearly $700,000. That wasn't enough for a rich life in West Palm Beach, Florida, but it was more than enough in Grant City, Illinois. In Grant City, things were cheaper, so I had time to think about how to move my things from Florida to Illinois. I called Susan, the only person I really knew there. Luckily, she had the key to my apartment. How's your mother? She asked. Better, I replied. She had a stroke, a bad one, but she's getting better. Thanks for asking. I could tell she cared even after just a couple of nights together. I was wondering if you could help me with something, I began. The book? She said excitedly. I had almost forgotten about it. It's important now, I said. I don't think anything is more important than getting that book published, she replied, her voice full of enthusiasm. Tyler, it's brilliant. You read it? I asked. Of course. I wouldn't share it without reading it first, she said proudly. And you liked it? I asked. Loved it. I already sent it to a friend. She should have it soon. Thanks, I said, happy about her words and her promise. I had almost forgotten the book was even a thing. That's true, she said. You called? Yeah, I wanted to let you know that I'm moving up here for a while. Susan fell silent and looked disappointed. I couldn't bring myself to tell her the full truth. Mom is in a rehab center, I finally said. Dad has his own business and really needs my help right now. What about your brother Bobby, or whatever his name is? She asked. It's Benny, I corrected her. He's married and has kids. He lives 4 hours away by car. She was quiet again. I need some help getting my stuff up here, I added. You have my key, remember? I was just thinking. Sure, Tyler, she said softly. You know that. What do I need to do? Let me make a few calls, I replied. I'll see who I can hire. Once I have someone, I'll call you. You can just drop the key off with them or something. Sure, she said, trying to sound cheerful. No problem. Anything you need? What's wrong? I asked. Nothing. Come on, I can tell. I don't know, yeah, she sighed. Just that. It felt like there was more to it. I sensed she cared about me and maybe wanted to date. I'm sorry, I said. What else could I say? Don't be, she tried to laugh, but it didn't feel real. Life happens, right? I guess so, I replied. It's only for a few days, right? Maybe just the first time, I said, feeling sad. Not the second time, though, so it could have been more. I told you, you're special, smart, nice, beautiful, and you have a great career all the way over there, I added. So you've quit your job? She asked. The silence stretched on for a bit. Give me the number, she said finally. Whoever you hire, I'll make sure you get your stuff back. Okay, thanks, Susan. Also, be on the lookout for a call from an agent. Okay, her name's Natalie. I will, Tyler, she said. I could hear her sniffling like she might cry. Yeah, take care of yourself, okay? You too. Then she hung up. 2 weeks later, it was mid-June. My car and all my furniture arrived safely from Florida, except for the car. My clothes and computer went into storage until I could find my own place. I couldn't do that until Mom came home from rehab. I quickly searched online and found the address of Susan's job. I had never asked for her home address, so I decided to send her a set of diamond earrings as thanks for her help. She called to protest, but I insisted. She had been there for me much more than I expected. I was working 12 hours a day in the workshop, sometimes with Dad, but usually alone. With Dad's help here and there, my woodworking skills were coming back. I was keeping up with orders, making quality furniture and cabinets. Dad only had to fix a few of my big mistakes, but he was getting way better work than he was paying me for, which was nothing. It was mid-morning when I decided to take a break from working on some drawers I was making from quilted maple. I was sipping coffee when I noticed a voicemail on my phone. Mr. Collins? A deep woman's voice said. This is Natalie Jagger. A mutual friend told me about something you wrote. I've read it and I would like to meet with you to discuss it. Please call me back when you can. She left a phone number, so I called her back. South Beach Talent? A cheerful voice answered. I'm returning Miss Jagger's call, I said. May I ask who's calling? Tyler Collins. One moment, please. 30 seconds later, the same deep voice returned. Tyler, she said cheerfully. Yes, ma'am. Call me Natalie, she said. Okay, I replied. Natalie, you wanted to meet with me? Yes. You've read Long Gone? I did, and I loved it, she said, sounding really excited. It was wonderful. Thanks. So do you think you can help me publish it? Her laughter was a bit rough, like she'd been smoking. No, darling, she said. You can't get it published, but I can, I smiled. Okay, what do we do now? First, we need to sign you up with our agency. Do you have a fax or an internet connection? Both, I said. Give me your email. I'll send you the standard agreement. You can look it over, make sure everything is good, then sign it and send it back to me. Okay. I thought for a moment. I knew agents charged a lot, but I wasn't a lawyer. I wouldn't understand half of what was in the agreement. Can you copy Susan on it? I asked. Of course, darling, she said. Good idea. She will be working with you from now on? I don't know. I'll have to ask her. Done, she said. At least she didn't seem like she was going to trick me. If she wanted to, she would have tried to talk me out of getting a lawyer, but she agreed right away. Have you met with any other agents yet? No. Good, she said, sounding relieved. If you don't mind, I'll start showing this to some publishers before we officially sign our agreement. Are you going to trick me, Tyler? She asked. No. Then I won't trick you, she laughed. We need to move fast. We can have it out by Christmas, which is perfect. Do you really think it's that good? I asked again. Tyler, I think it's absolutely brilliant. It could be a bestseller and it might even win some awards. The sooner we can publish it, the better. I was amazed. Sure, I had worked hard, but this was my first book. Of course, Natalie interrupted my thoughts. You'll need an editor. Some parts might need work, but that's normal. The editor will know what to fix. An editor? I asked. The publishing house provides one, she answered. They always do. I hadn't thought about that. Even great first books still need help from professionals. Well, I guess you should do what you think is best, I said. I'm pretty new to all of this. She paused for a moment before she spoke again. What I meant was, she said slowly, There's a freelance editor in Chicago. We could hire her and then get reimbursed. That's allowed. But they might not agree to pay us back. If that happens, you'll have to take it from your share of royalties. It could be about $10,000 or $15,000, but doing this would help get the book out faster. Just in time for Christmas, she added. Then it'll be worth it, right? Probably, I replied. Then go ahead. I'll take care of it, she said with a sigh. First, open that email. Print it out. Go over it with Susan or whoever you hire, sign it and send it back to me. I'll start working on getting this published. Okay, I said, but suddenly wondered, do we need to meet? But she had already hung up. I guessed she didn't want to meet, and that was fine. I didn't feel like going back to Florida just yet. The next afternoon, Susan called. She said the deal with the agent was good, so I signed it. I felt more like a real writer. I had an agent now. The 4th of July was on a Friday that year, making Thursday night lively. Friends and family were back in town, and it felt busy. I was tired of writing at night, even though I was making good progress on my new outline. It was almost done. Originally, I had finished it quickly, but now I was adding more details to the story, so I thought, why not? My dad was visiting my mom and would grab something to eat on his way home. It was almost 7:30 and I wanted some company. A few beers at the bar and grill sounded great. By 8, I was showered, dressed in neat shorts and a golf shirt, and driving into the packed parking lot of the bar and grill. In Grant City, people generally went to 3 places: the bar and grill, the hitching rail, or other bars. But the other bars didn't get nearly as busy as the bar and grill or the hitching rail. The food at both places was simply better. Everyone knew the bar and grill had the best food. But sometimes you just wanted a good greasy burger with crispy fries, and that's when you went to the hitching rail. They also had live bands a few times a month, and some local musicians from a band called General Beauregard would drop by when they weren't touring or recording. Anyway, I liked the bar and grill. The food was lighter and nicer than regular pub food, but mostly I enjoyed the atmosphere. There was a jukebox, but it wasn't too loud, and the tables had enough space between them to feel comfortable. It was crowded, just as I expected. Many classmates from different years were gathered, sharing drinks and catching up, talking about their families and old times. The dining room was full too, so I quickly put my name on the wait list for a table. "Need some company for dinner?" a voice said behind me. "Allie," I replied without turning around. "Same," she said, leaning over to kiss my ear softly. I turned to see her. It was Allison Palmer, Kristen's cousin. She was the prettiest of the Palmer girls, and there were a lot of pretty ones. Everyone in Grant City had joked for years that old Grandpa Palmer should have been a stud because all his granddaughters were stunning. "You look great," I said, looking at her bright smile and sparkling hazel eyes. "You look handsome," she replied, sipping her Corona while keeping her eyes on me. "Still single?" I asked. "Seems like a perfect time for a dinner date," she said with a mischievous smile. I laughed. "There'd be a long line if that were true." "You get first dibs," she winked at me. I smiled, but my mind was racing. Here I was, facing my ex-wife's cousin trying to ask me out. "Listen, you're single," she pressed. "She left you, right? That means you can date whoever you want." "Yeah, but your father," she laughed, showing her bright teeth, and she had Kristen's cute dimples. "I'm not asking you to a family reunion, Tyler," she said, raising her beer towards me. I took a sip, enjoying the cold, lime-flavored beer as it went down. "This probably isn't a great idea," I said. "Sure, I'd love to have dinner with you, Allie," I finally said. We chatted easily while we waited for our table and then during dinner. It felt natural since we had known each other for most of our lives. We had gone to the same Christmas parties, Thanksgiving dinners, and picnics for years. She waited until after dinner while we shared some dessert to bring up my ex. "She's miserable, you know," Allie said. "Who? Kristen?" I didn't say anything. They were stuck in a small, run-down 2-bedroom condo on Adams Street. She continued to live there after they got married. It was cramped and messy, and she spent her days home alone with the baby, feeling bored and trapped. Money was tight, and she felt overwhelmed. "She made her choice," I said. "She said you weren't paying attention to her," Allison added. I could tell she was prodding for more. "You were off working all the time. She was always left alone with no friends." I felt my temper start to rise. Then she should have gotten a job, I replied, trying to keep my cool. You're right, Allison said, but I thought you'd want to know about her. I sighed. She messed up and she knows it. Allison scooped a cherry onto her spoon and looked at it. Now that you're back from that tough job far away, she said. Yeah? I urged her to go on. Are you thinking about trying to win her back? She asked. I couldn't believe it. You're joking, right? I said. She raised an eyebrow, surprised. Not a chance, I replied. She's married now and they have a kid. She made her choice. But that's your kid too, she pointed out. I stared at her. What difference does it make? She's with someone else now. They can have each other. Allison had an idea. How about we go up to the bar for a few drinks? She suggested. Sounds great, I replied. Then she leaned closer and said, We can go back to my place for a bit. This was the moment where I had to decide, be smart or accept her invitation. Sounds like a plan, I said quietly. You sure? She asked, noticing my hesitation. I smiled and said, Definitely. I'm a man, right? Allison lived in a small house on Polk Street up north. She taught English at the local high school, so her paycheck wasn't huge, but she didn't have a family to support, just herself and her cozy home. The place was tidy, nicely decorated, and filled with family pictures of the Palmers. As soon as we entered her house, she turned and pulled me in for a kiss. I've wanted this for a long time, she whispered, wrapping her arms around my neck. It was a passionate kiss, one that felt like we could take our time. We kissed for what felt like ages, maybe 10 minutes or maybe longer. I was lost in the moment. She looked a lot like Kristen, but I pushed that thought away. This was Allison, who had wanted me for a while. That felt good enough. It was different from the other women I had spent time with lately. I want you, she mumbled between kisses. How? I asked, unsure of what to do. Whatever you want, she whispered in my ear, opening up new possibilities for us. Just tell me what you want, I managed to say. Just do what you want. Anything, she replied. We ended up spending the night together and afterward lay beside each other. I wondered what was on her mind. Let's not talk about her, I said, enjoying the warmth of her body next to mine. I stayed at her place, feeling happy to wake up next to her. She was up before me, which was unusual for me since I usually woke up early. Breakfast, she called from the door. I had been awake when she slipped out of bed, but wanted to linger for a moment. Eggs and pancakes, she said, smiling at me. When I opened my eyes, she was in a short t-shirt looking cute. Oh no, not that Tyler, she said jokingly. Come on, I pleaded. I was there for you. Funny, she said with a grin, and then lost her shirt as she walked toward the bed. A little while later, I learned that mornings could be quite nice. 2 days later, I was at the store looking at watermelons when I heard a voice behind me. Are you really with my cousin just to get back at me? Kristen asked. I didn't turn around. I'm shopping here, I replied, picking out a watermelon. Good to see you. Have a nice day, I said without looking back. She was with a little boy, not even a year old. He was chubby with blonde hair and bright blue eyes. He looked at me curiously and I smiled back. Hey there, buddy, I said softly. He wiggled his arms and beamed at me. Kristen looked between her son and me, trying to figure things out. What are you talking about? I asked, trying to avoid more trouble. I waved goodbye to the toddler and pushed my cart toward the bakery section. She followed me. I have to tell you something, Kristen insisted. And it's all your fault, she added. How? I asked, trying to understand. Seriously, Tyler, she said with frustration. She's my cousin, she said as I looked at the French bread. I wanted to find a nice loaf. The tomatoes were a little old this year, but I hoped to make a tomato, basil, and bread salad with some good olive oil for dinner. That salad goes great with beer can chicken on the grill. I added a loaf of slightly stale bread to my cart and headed to the meat aisle, but she kept following me, getting annoyed by how relaxed I was. Stay away from her, Kristen told me. There are plenty of single women in Grant City for you. You should keep away from my family for goodness sake. No, I replied, looking at the chickens. I picked one up, added it to my cart, and turned to face her. I said no. She stared at me angrily, but I kept my face calm. You lost the right to tell me who to date, I said steadily. It's not your business, so stay out of it. But Allie made it my business. Kristen was furious. So now everyone knows, I shrugged. It was bound to happen sooner or later. And you think this is funny? She asked, sounding upset. I'm not trying to hurt you, Kristen, I replied, putting my hands on the cart and heading toward the checkout. Tyler, she called after me, but I ignored her. I had chicken to grill and a tomato bread salad to make, and Allie was coming over for dinner. It was mid-July when I heard back from Natalie. Well, that didn't take long, she said from her cool office in Florida. What didn't take long? I asked, confused. Selling the book, she replied. I was shocked. She found a publisher in less than a month. Are you still there? She laughed. Who bought it? I asked. The movie rights, she said. Someone wanted to make a movie from my book. She laughed again and then coughed, as if she had been inhaling while laughing. Calm down, she said. No one has bought it yet. I felt like a balloon that had just popped. We're having a bidding war, she explained, which means many publishers want the book because they think it will be a big hit. They all place bids, and then I go back to them. It's like an auction, but on the phone. And this is a good thing? I asked. Oh, yes, she said, gasping for air. It's really good for the movie part, too. The same thing is happening with producers, who are bidding for the rights to make a film. How did they find out about the book? I wondered. They have people who keep the publishing houses updated, she explained. So how much money are we talking about? I asked, feeling nervous to say too much. Well, kiddo, she said, becoming serious. You'd better tell me you're working on something else. I'm almost done with the outline, I replied. It's a thriller about Lieutenant Randolph. She seemed relieved to hear that. Thank goodness, she said. That's going to help the bids go up. Why's that? I asked, not fully understanding. She explained, everyone agrees he's a great character. He's complicated but still nice and very smart. That will attract female readers. I nodded, slowly understanding. Just like in movies, publishers like to bank on characters that are already popular. They like series like Jack Reacher or Inspector Rebus or even those many Friday the 13th movies. Oh, I get it now, I said. That shouldn't be a problem. Good, she replied. If things go as they seem to be, you'll be busy writing about Lieutenant Randolph for a long time. They're talking about a 3-book deal, and you could become a millionaire, Natalie said excitedly. My eyes nearly popped out at that. I knew you could make a lot of money if you hit the bestseller list, but a millionaire right away? So get started on that outline, she told me. Okay, I will, I said. Oh, and one more thing, she added. What is it? I asked. I've got your editor from Chicago ready to help you. Oh, who's that? I asked. It's a woman, Natalie said. Her name is Marissa Key. You'll like her. I'll give her your number so you two can connect and finish this as soon as possible. Okay, I agreed. Good luck, she said, wrapping up our call. Wait, I said before she could hang up. What's her name again? She laughed. Oh, right, it's Marissa Key. I liked that name. The next morning, bright and early while I drank my coffee, my phone rang. Who is it? Dad asked, still reading the paper and munching on toast. I don't know, I replied, not recognizing the number. I flipped open my phone. Hello, Tyler Collins, a voice said. It was hard to describe, somewhere between deep and high, and there was a special sound to it, almost like a song. Hello, I said. This is Marissa Key, she said. Your editor. Miss Key, I replied, surprised. I've been waiting to hear from you. What does your day look like? She asked, skipping the small talk. Hold on a second. I covered the mouthpiece and asked Dad, what does today look like? We're all caught up, he said, still focused on the paper. Maybe a couple of hours in the morning, but nothing major. I'm free from 11 on. I returned to the phone. I'm free after 11, I told her. Great, she said. I'll be there at 11:30. You're coming here? I asked, relieved I wouldn't have to drive to Chicago. Yes, she confirmed. Are there any hotels where you are? In Grant City, I said. And yes, we have 2 hotels. I'll be at the hotel by 11:30, she said. At your house. I could hear her irritation about our chit-chat. You know where I live? I asked. Yes. Okay then, I replied. She hung up without saying anything more. What was Natalie putting on me? By 11:15, Dad had left to visit Mom, and I had washed off the dust that clung to my skin and hair. I changed into clean khaki pants, a light blue dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up for the summer heat, and boat shoes, without socks. As I was finishing up combing my damp hair, the doorbell rang. Marissa Key was early. I ran the comb through my hair one last time, checked my shave, and hurried down the stairs. Why was I rushing like a late student? I forced myself to slow down as I got to the door, remembering her serious voice on the phone. Opening the door, I realized that Marissa was nothing like a second-grade teacher. She looked like a rock star. Maybe a fan of Lou Reed, but definitely not a school teacher. "Mr. Collins," she said with a unique accent. I nodded and stepped back to let her in, taking in her tall figure, nearly my height, maybe 5'9", with long legs and a skinny frame like a model. "Just to thank you," she said. Her hair was spiky yet thick, like she had stuck it in a socket. Her face was a mix of different backgrounds, with a small chin, high cheekbones, full lips, a tiny nose, and large dark brown eyes with a slight slant. She could easily be a model with her look, but her clothes told a different story. She wore tight black jeans, heavy black boots with studs, and a short black t-shirt that showed her sharp hip bones and hinted at a tattoo. Studded bracelets ran along her wrists, and she carried a big black leather bag. Her makeup was bold: black mascara, dark lipstick, a diamond stud in her nose. I couldn't tell how old she was. She could have been 16 or my age. "Where should we work?" she said, ignoring my shocked gaze. Do you have a dining room table?" I asked. I nodded, trying to focus on those dark brown eyes. "Can you connect your laptop there?" she continued. "Yeah, I can do that," I replied. "Great," she said, turning toward the kitchen and looking for the dining room. "Get your laptop and bring it to the table." I did as she asked. A few minutes later, we were seated with my laptop ready. She moved it in front of her, and I slid closer to see. "Okay," she said once I pulled up the final version of my work. "Time to start." She took out a large booklet with my manuscript inside. It was about 6 inches thick, held together by thick rubber bands and filled with yellow sticky notes. "You've read it already?" I asked as she took off the rubber bands. "Of course. What did you think?" I was hoping for a compliment. She looked at me, and her expression made it clear I was wasting her time. "You're a good writer, Mr. Collins," she said. "It's Tyler," I added almost automatically. Then I paused. "Just good?" She frowned and replied, "Better than most." "Really?" I asked. "Really," she said, flipping through the first pages. "Can we just get started?" "Sure," I said. "Good," she said, showing that we wouldn't take extra time. And we didn't. I wondered what to say. She had my manuscript for a week, and her notes filled the pages. "Isn't there a better word for this?" "What are you saying here?" "Is this the best way to say it?" "Make it tighter. The conflict is fading." And that was just the first 60 pages, which took us until 6:30 to finish over 7 hours. We took 2 short breaks, and she stepped out 3 times to smoke. I tried to chat with her during the first break, but her look said it wasn't a good idea. Still, I had to admit she was great at this. The changes she suggested amazed me. When I reread the first 15 pages, they were better than my original manuscript, my ticket to success. "Well," she said, pushing away from the table as I read our updates. "That's enough for one day," I told her. She nodded. "I'm hungry. Are there any good restaurants around here?" I smiled and asked, "Can I take you to dinner?" She shook her head. "That's not needed, Mr. Collins." "Probably not," I said. "But I want to." Her look warned me to give up, but I kept trying. "I really want to talk about this, about you and how you do your work. So if you don't mind, I would like to take you to dinner." She stared back, her lips tight, saying nothing. I decided to wait her out, trying to keep my face eager and innocent. After a moment, the edges of her lips lifted slightly. It was the closest thing to a smile I had seen from her that day. "Fine," she said, reaching over and gathering the loose pages of the manuscript into a neat pile. "Let's have a working dinner. We should be able to finish 10 more pages." I tried to show with my face and body that this wasn't what I wanted, but she didn't look at me. "Bring the laptop," she said, pushing away from the table and throwing her bag over her shoulder. I didn't argue again. Any thoughts that Marissa Key was on a diet disappeared during dinner. I watched her eat a big bowl of gazpacho, then a serving of Mexican stuffed meatloaf with grilled zucchini and cheesy mashed potatoes. When she was done, her plate looked spotless. "Still hungry?" I asked, glancing at my half-eaten sandwich and fresh fruit. "Sure," she replied, moving her plate aside and taking mine. All the while, we kept working on the manuscript. We moved quicker now. I started trusting her advice, and she learned my style for sentences and word choices. As Marissa finished the last bite of fruit, the waitress came over. It was Nicole, who owns the restaurant, with her husband. She looked at our plates, then at Marissa. "Dessert, what do you have?" Marissa asked, without looking up from the laptop. Nicole looked surprised. I shrugged and smiled back. Nicole listed the dessert options, and Marissa chose the bananas Foster with cinnamon ice cream. "2 spoons," Nicole said. Marissa glanced at me and then asked, "Do you want some, Mr. Collins?" I just smiled and shook my head. "Just coffee, please." Nicole almost laughed, but Marissa didn't notice me. "Could you stop calling me Mr. Collins?" I said. "It's your name," she replied, pointing at the manuscript. "What about this?" "I'd rather be called Tyler," I said. "We are probably the same age, right?" "Whatever," she replied, showing impatience again. "Fine, Tyler. I'll call you Tyler." "So, Tyler, what should we do here?" "Tyler?" "Yeah," I said, smiling at her irritation. "Let's change it." "How? What's your idea?" "I want you to tell me how to make it better," I said, trying to explain. "We've spent the evening editing without you really teaching me anything. I need to know how you spot mistakes." She frowned, then looked at the laptop. Quickly, she saved the work on the hard drive and a flash drive. Then she shut the laptop, piled up the manuscript, and put it aside just in time for Nicole to bring her dessert. Picking up her spoon, she took a bite and turned to me. "Okay, what do you want to know?" "How old are you?" 25. "How did you get into editing?" "I'm in graduate school at Northwestern working on my doctorate. This job helps pay my bills. I major in English and creative writing. Have you written anything?" Her face showed brief anger and she didn't answer. "How long have you been editing professionally?" I asked. 4 years. "Why do you do it?" "Like I said, it pays the bills. School is expensive, you know." I nodded. "How long did it take you to go through my manuscript?" "There's no need to be offended," she said, narrowing her eyes. "It's my job." "I'm not offended," I replied. "Just curious. You spent 2 months editing this and you only got it last week, right?" "It took me 3 days," she said, eating more bananas Foster. "This is good, by the way. Want to try some?" "No, I'm fine," I said, but she held a spoonful of ice cream and caramelized banana in front of me. "Really? Try it." So I rolled my eyes and took a bite. "You're right," I admitted, taking the spoon from her as I savored the dessert. She smiled, the first real smile of the day. "I got it on Sunday morning. I worked 17 or 18 hours a day for 3 days." "What did you do first?" "I read through the whole thing twice." "Are you a fast reader?" She shook her head. "I'm quick, but not a speed reader. It goes faster the second time because I know what to look for. The second time, I note where the plot gets weak or if something doesn't make sense." I nodded, gaining more respect for her skills. Now I realized I had a lot to learn. After finishing her dessert, she held her spoon out to me again, but I waved it off, which made her happy. After that, I just keep going over it. "How many times did you go through it?" "Maybe 12 or 14. A lot." "Do they pay you well for this?" She hesitated before replying, "Well, enough to cover my expenses while I'm here. They want me to drive to and from Chicago every day. It's not practical." I pulled out my phone. "Who are you calling?" she asked, looking surprised. "They pay for your room and meals," I told her. She shook her head, quickly trying to take my phone from me. I turned my shoulder to block her. "Natalie?" I said when she picked up. "Hello, Tyler," she said weakly. I imagined her looking like an old TV character from a court show, smoking while talking. "Marissa's here," I said. "Good," Natalie chuckled. "What's the plan?" Natalie asked. She needed the publisher. Whoever that might be had to cover her room and meals while she was here. But, she pointed out, it was only an hour away. "That's 2 hours wasted driving when we could be finishing this work." "Exactly," I replied. Natalie was quiet for a moment before she spoke again. Are you ready to put everything aside until this is done? Yes, I said, looking over at Marissa, who was giving me an angry look. Natalie sighed. Fine. How much can a room cost in Podunk, Illinois? And Natalie, what? She replied. This was my idea, I said, staring right back at Marissa. She's upset. I'm the one asking for this, okay? Natalie chuckled, her laugh wheezing. Told you she's tough. No, I replied. You only gave me a vague warning and now it's true. Natalie found this very funny. She was still laughing when I closed my phone. You have school expenses. I slipped the phone into my pocket. The cost for rooms and meals should be paid for by those who can afford it. Okay, she said, but her glare didn't go away. Instead, she stomped off to the restroom, then returned, gathering her things. 8 o'clock, she said, looking down at me. See you then. By the next day, we had worked through another 70 pages of the manuscript and made changes to the first 60. By the end of the afternoon, I felt mentally and physically drained. Marissa looked serious as I rubbed my tired eyes. Tomorrow, then, she said, getting up and putting her things back in her bag. Wait, I said, reaching for her arm. She pulled it away and glared at me. What? Why are you so angry? I asked. You've been upset all day. You shouldn't have done that, she replied. Done what? Arranged the hotel room and meals. She glared back at me. I didn't just do it for you, I said. I want us to finish this faster, too. Yeah, she said, still tense. Whatever. I just don't understand why it's such a big deal. Because they don't want freelance editors who demand too much, I explained. If we do, they just go to someone else. Okay, she said. You got what you wanted, but I might lose jobs because of it. I could only stare at her, feeling embarrassed. I tried to help her, but maybe I messed up her chances. I grabbed my phone and called Natalie. Still going well? She asked, her voice raspy. Yes, I said. Marissa is amazing. Natalie laughed at that. Yeah, right. No, I insisted. We're really making progress. That's great, kiddo, she replied. About that call yesterday, is Marissa going to get in trouble? Publishers might complain, she said. It depends on who gets the book. Really? Why didn't you tell me? I didn't think you cared, she said, surprised at my sudden anger. Then don't do it, I said. I'll handle it myself. Okay, Tyler, Natalie replied. I'll sort it out. Really? We can't risk it, I said, looking at Marissa. She looked even angrier now. You really like her, don't you? Natalie asked, surprised. She's brilliant, I said. I want to be sure she'll work with me next time. Okay, Natalie agreed. Consider it done. We'll split the cost, if that's okay. No, I said. I'll pay for everything. If that's what you want, she said softly, surprised by my decision. And this whole situation stays between us, okay? I added. Don't blame her for this in the future. I wouldn't do that, she protested, but maybe she sounded a bit too defensive. I mean it, I insisted. If she loses work because I messed up, I'll hear about it. And if she won't work on my next book, I'll know why. Okay, calm down, Tyler, Natalie said. It's forgotten. Thanks, I softened, and sorry for getting involved. Don't worry about it, kiddo, she said before hanging up. I turned to Marissa. I'm sorry, I won't interfere anymore. She pursed her lips and nodded. So now that I'm paying, can I take you to dinner before you go back to your room for the night? Just a burger, though, she replied. Not as costly as last night. I can afford a better dinner than just burgers. Better than just a burger, she repeated, her eyes flaring. The hitching rail it is, I said, pushing my chair back. We drove separately to the restaurant, and I got there first. As soon as I walked in, I was greeted with a tight hug and a kiss. Hey, you, Allie said, pulling back for air. Hey, babe, I said, kissing her cheek and hugging her tightly again. I really needed that hug after spending the day with Marissa, who'd been grumpy the whole time. Have you eaten yet? Allie whispered in my ear. No, I said, breaking the hug. I'm meeting someone for a working dinner. Oh, she pouted a little. But you can invite me to join, right? Is he here yet? I saw Marissa getting out of her car and walking toward the entrance. She is, I said, nodding toward her. You're kidding, right? Allie said, trying to hide her shock as she saw Marissa's goth style. Just be nice, I whispered, turning to Marissa as she walked in. Marissa, this is Allison, my... My girlfriend. Marissa nodded at me, looked at Allie, and then reached out her hand. Allison? Allison tried to smile as she shook Marissa's hand, but her eyes were locked on Marissa's dark makeup and spiky hair. Is it okay if she joins us for dinner? I asked Marissa. Your ticket? Marissa shrugged. Invite whoever you want. In no time, we were sitting down and placing our orders. So, do you want to work on this or what? Marissa asked, looking at me on her right. Work on what? Allie, sitting to my left, joined in. His book, Marissa said, sneaking a glance at me. Book? I've written a book, I explained. Really? Allie said, sounding doubtful. A book about what? She asked, her curiosity rising. His agent? Editor? Marissa mumbled, staring at her Diet Coke. A book? Allie said again, her face showing both disbelief and excitement. You're not joking. You've written something and she's editing it for you. Go on. Show her. I urged Marissa. Marissa pulled the worn manuscript from her bag and dropped it on the table in front of Allie. Wow, Allie said, running her fingers over the title before flipping through the pages. It's huge. She looked at me. I was going to tell you once we got a publisher for it, I said. Not like it's a secret or anything. I looked directly at Marissa as I said this. So, how do you get a publisher? Allie asked, her eyes glued to the manuscript as she flipped through it. The next hour went by as we talked about when and why I started writing a book, what the book was about, and all the details about getting it published. I tried to bring Marissa into the conversation more, but she seemed happy just to eat her burger and fries, along with a basket of cookies for dessert. She only shared one cookie with me and Allie. Sometimes she would give a little info about the publishing process, but that was it. Then Allie asked her directly, and Marissa had no choice but to respond. How many books have you edited so far? Allie questioned Marissa. 19, Marissa replied. Any I've heard of? Allie pressed. Name 3 or 4 that were bestsellers. And this one? Allie added. How does it compare? Allie asked. Marissa just shrugged. Come on, Allie encouraged. You've seen good ones and you've seen not-so-good ones, right? They were all pretty good, Marissa said, not meeting my curious gaze. So how's this one? I asked. She only chewed her lip in silence, her shoulders tensing as she gripped her Diet Coke. You won't hurt his feelings, Allie said. Right, Tyler? Not at all, I agreed. So, how is it? I pressed. Allie tried another angle. Marissa remained silent and Allie looked at me with a confused expression. I shrugged. Allie turned back to Marissa, leaning closer. Is it that bad? Marissa looked up as if she had been shocked. You're kidding, right? That bad? So, it's good? Allie asked. It's the best thing I've ever worked on, Marissa said, then quickly glanced at me, looking embarrassed. So, you think it's... I can't say if it will sell, she replied, focusing on the table. But if people know what's good, this is going to be big. Allie's mouth dropped open. That good? Better, Marissa said. So it's more than just decent? I asked, smiling at her earlier comment about being good. She looked at me, then back at the table. Wow, Tyler, Allie said, watching Marissa closely. Sorry, I said. How about we all go get a beer? I suggested. Sure, Allie said as she stood up. Marissa looked between me and Allie, lost. I'm just going to head back and call it a night, if that's okay, she said. Allie tried to persuade her to stay, but Marissa was firm. So she left, and Allie and I headed to the bar for a drink. Halfway through our first beer, Allie started smiling. What? I asked. This beer, she said, making a face. What's wrong with it? It doesn't taste right. Let me get you a different one, I offered to the bartender. It's not that, she said, leaning closer. I'm just thinking of something that might taste better. I got the hint. We hurried back to her place, and it didn't take long to find out she was right. She definitely tasted better than the beer. She's strange, Allie said while we relaxed afterward. How so? I asked. Allie chuckled. Like you didn't notice. The makeup, those black clothes? For starters, she added, rolling over to face me, but she seems angry, more like angry at the whole world. I stared, my mind drifting over the few days I had known Marissa and the hours spent editing the book. Not like a crazy person, Allie explained. More like someone who feels life is tough and everyone is upset. Know what I mean? Yeah, I said, starting to agree. I suppose that could be it. Still, what? Allie encouraged when I didn't finish my thought. I shrugged. I just don't really know her. It could be anger or just being shy or having a bad day. Come on, you only met her for an hour at dinner. Allie gazed into my eyes, thinking over my words. Then she smiled, which turned into a full grin. That's why I love you, she said. You're so sweet. You can't say a bad thing about anyone, can you? Love me? I asked, feeling tense at the word. Her smile grew bigger. You know what I mean? She slipped under the covers and showed me just what she meant. The next 5 days were spent with Marissa, editing for about 10 to 12 hours a day, tightening up parts, changing a word here or there. On the 4th morning, I noticed something different. Marissa was coming in with extra notes and changes on things we had already gone over. When did you do this? I asked. What? She replied, frustrated with my questions about wasting time, going over things we had already discussed. Changes we've already made? At night. After dinner, she replied. What's the difference? I asked. It has to be done. I thought she would go back and work another 4 or 5 hours while I stayed in the shop, trying to fix my dad's old work and handle his numbers. I didn't even think before I mentioned it. She rolled her eyes at me and looked annoyed. Okay, now you know. Can we get back to work? She said. That was when I understood she wasn't really mad at the world. Allie was wrong about her. Marissa was angry sometimes, for sure, but it wasn't because she couldn't stand foolishness. She was serious about her work, and she got upset when she lost her focus. I smiled at this thought and decided to test my idea. So, do you date anyone? None of your business, she replied, not looking up from her laptop, typing away. Have you ever been married? I asked. Not answering, she said, pointing at the part of the manuscript we just reviewed. Are you sure about this? Yeah, I answered. What about kids? Do you have any kids? That was it. I pushed too far. What the heck? She said. Who cares? Tyler, my personal life is not your concern. This book is what you need to worry about, got it? The sooner you stop worrying about my life and focus on making this story better, the better for both of us. You said it was really good, I shot back, enjoying this little fight. I started with something very rough, she said, getting up. But it needs work, and we don't have much time. Where are you going? I asked, following her outside for a smoke. She walked toward the kitchen door alone. I smiled as I watched her open her lighter and light her cigarette, puffing it hard to get rid of the stress I caused. My dad pulled into the driveway. I watched him get out of the truck and noticed the stranger smoking on the back porch. The look of shock on his face was priceless. I had told him about the editor, but I didn't describe her, and he had been at the rehab clinic most of the last 2 weeks, so he hadn't seen her. As he walked toward her and then past her with a quick greeting, I couldn't help but chuckle. She just nodded at him as he opened the door and went into the kitchen. Is that? He started. Yep, I said, smiling. What do you think of her? He turned to look and then back at me. You're kidding, right? She's going to help you with this book? Yep. She's the one, I said. Is she any good? The look on his face told me he didn't believe me, but I felt playful that morning. Actually, Dad, she's a total genius. She's from Chicago, right? He asked. That made sense. You didn't see many goth girls in Grant City, even at the local college. I just smiled and nodded. Jesus, he said, shaking his head as he walked past me and headed upstairs to change. Marissa came back inside a few minutes later, and we went back to work without more questions. When my dad went to the shop, he left through the front door, avoiding us. It was day 11, and Marissa and I were just 23 pages away from finishing when my phone rang late in the morning. Natalie? I said. We finally got a winning bid, she said, her excitement almost bursting through the phone. I stopped, scared to ask. Well? She pushed. Aren't you going to ask who, how much? How many books is the deal? 3, she answered, with an option for 2 more, so I have to write 5? No, just 3. If you finish those, then they may ask for 2 more. What are the terms? Your royalty is 15%, which is pretty good. Not the best, but above average for a first-timer. How many will they print? Long Gone will have a first printing of 250,000. Your advance is 1/3 of the royalties from that first run. The rest of your royalties will be paid every 3 months. And how much do they charge at the start? $17 a book. I tried to do the math in my head but couldn't. A little over 200 grand when you sign the contract, she explained. The rest will be paid as sales go beyond the first 1/3 of the first run. Got it so far? I nodded. 200 grand up front. For real. Okay, then here's the best part. Your rate goes up to 18 for any hardcover or paperback copies over $500,000. That's really good. Will there be less for the trade paperbacks? Sure, they sell for less, but it's still good money. The small difference didn't seem like much to me, but it excited her. Now, here's the best part. The movie rights. You've already got someone interested in them. We sold the option for $500,000 as a percentage of gross receipts if they make a movie. Wow, so I get 500 grand even if they don't make a movie? When do I get that? As soon as you sign, she said. And when can I sign all of this? As soon as you can get to Miami. I sat back, looking at Marissa but not really seeing her. Please tell me it's almost done, I said. Natalie replied, No later than noon tomorrow. I heard her sigh with relief. That's great, kiddo. Then you can come down here the day after. Sure. See you then. I hung up and stared at the ceiling. Good news? Marissa asked. I looked at her and nodded. It's sold, I said. She smiled tightly. Good, she said. Let's get moving. You promised this by noon tomorrow. I don't know why I did it. Maybe it was the excitement of everything. Whatever it was, I leaned over and pulled Marissa into a big hug, nearly dragging her out of her chair, and we both fell to the floor. I felt a lot of my stress fade away. I could feel her body getting tenser as we hugged. I'm sorry, I whispered in her ear, pulling away with a bit of embarrassment. It's okay, she replied, relaxing a bit before checking the manuscript. Where did we leave off? We wrapped up the work the next afternoon. Marissa sent the finished manuscript to Natalie, then organized the papers before bundling them with rubber bands and tossing them into her big bag. Let's go out to celebrate, I suggested. She looked at me, shaking her head. Come on, I insisted. Just one last meal at the bar and grill. They have a new dessert. She hesitated, but I kept pushing. Listen, I'm sure you're tired of me. You probably want to leave and find a real meal somewhere nice in the city. But we should start a tradition, I added. A tradition? She echoed. Yes, I said. You'll be the editor for all my books if you want. We should always have dinner at the bar and grill after finishing an edit. Then you can forget about me for 6 months while I write another book. And then we'll do it all over again at the bar and grill? She asked, a smile forming on her lips for the second time since we'd met. Like Thanksgiving turkey, I said, grinning. Santa Claus, she replied. Exactly, I said. Even if it's just the start of a tradition, it has to begin somewhere. She smiled wider now. It was a nice smile, even with her black lipstick. Should we call your girlfriend? She asked. I shook my head. Nope. She tilted her head. Why not? Because we're starting a tradition, I explained. I don't know if we'll still be together next year when we do this again. And if we do, we'll have to invite her because of the tradition, Marissa said, pretending to understand seriously. Exactly, I replied. Okay, she said, standing up and gathering her things. Pick me up at 5:30. I'll be done by 5:45. Soon we were seated at the bar and grill. Marissa dove into some Thai chicken wings, and I enjoyed my beer, watching her in awe. What? She asked, noticing me staring as she licked sauce off her fingers. I just can't believe you can eat so much and stay so, well, fit, I said. Well, skinny, she replied, pushing her empty plate aside. I know what I look like. I smiled. So how do you do it? Don't know, she shrugged. Just lucky, I guess. So what do you want to do with your life? I asked, remembering she was in graduate school. Why are you studying? Writing, she said. I love books. They're my passion. Do you want to teach? I asked, wondering how someone who looked so unique could stand in front of a serious class. Well, maybe, she smiled as our dinners arrived. She had a burger with sweet potato fries while I got a grilled chicken sandwich with fresh fruit. Sorry, but I can't eat like you. I'd gain too much weight, I joked. I really want to write, she said, taking a big bite. Books? Short stories? Poems? Probably not poetry, she replied. Short stories are nice, but they don't pay enough. I really need to focus on books. Got any ideas? I asked. She shook her head while stuffing more fries in her mouth after finishing her burger. I need more life experience, she said once she swallowed. What about you? What are your life experiences? I pressed. Are you married? Engaged? Do you have kids? Brothers or sisters? Where are you from? Tell me about Marissa. Not much to tell, she began. I was born and raised in Chicago. I have a half-sister. My mom and dad divorced when I was 7. I've seen my dad maybe 10 times since then. My mom's a teacher, and my sister's a lawyer. I'm not seeing anyone right now. I nodded. So, your sister, the lawyer? Yeah, she said, looking at me closely. Susan is my sister. A different dad, the same mom. I was shocked. No wonder Natalie laughed. Don't pout, Marissa said, noticing my reaction. When Susan said she knew an agent, was she lying? Sort of, Marissa admitted. I know the agent. When she read your manuscript, she told me I had to check it out and find someone to look at it for you, so she sent it to me. And I thought it was incredible. So you called Natalie? I asked to confirm. Marissa nodded. I've worked with her before. I told her I found a great new manuscript that needed an agent. It took some asking, but she agreed to read it if Susan could get it to her. And then, that was it. I leaned back in my chair, taking it all in as we finished eating in silence. Done pouting? Marissa asked, pushing her plate aside and reaching for a piece of melon on my plate. I chuckled. There's nothing to pout about. Well, you did me a big favor, she said with a shrug. I just wish I'd known sooner. What does it matter? I asked. I wouldn't have pushed Natalie to pay for the room so hard. She shook her head. It's still business, remember? And what about your cut? Do you get anything? She shrugged again, not giving an answer. Natalie will likely give me a small bonus. Not a lot, but something. So, what do you get from it? She smiled at me. You're joking, right? I know it's not just because you enjoy my company. You've made that clear over the last 11 days. It's so another good writer can get a chance, she said. I shook my head. Fine, she said it was true. Natalie agreed to be my agent. If I can write a book and if it's good. Okay, I nodded. That seems fair. So, now you know everything, right? I guess so. The waitress came by and took away our dirty plates. Marissa ordered warm peach melba and a glass of Pinot Grigio. So how is Susan doing? I asked. She likes you, Marissa said, finishing her drink and looking impatiently at the kitchen where her dessert was being made. A lot. Is she seeing anyone? I asked. Marissa turned back to me. You really want to know? What does that mean? She just made it sound like you were just casual friends. That wasn't my choice, I argued, feeling angry. Come on, Tyler, she said, frowning at my reaction. Chill out. It's fine if that's all it was. I'm just saying. Saying what? That I only cared about her for fun. She said to relax. I don't really know how you feel about her, okay? I nodded, trying to calm down. Who's that over there? Marissa asked. Don't change the subject, I replied. She's been staring at you for the past 20 minutes, and I can't tell if it's a good or bad look. I started to turn, but Marissa grabbed my arm. Don't look, she said. She looks a lot like your girlfriend. What's her name? Allison? Yeah, that's her, and she's with a guy and a baby. My ex-wife, I said with her new family. Marissa frowned and then took a bite of her dessert when it arrived. Want a bite? She asked, with her mouth full of peaches, ice cream, and raspberry sauce. I shook my head, happy to drink my coffee. So that's her new husband and baby, I said, sneaking a quick look to confirm it was indeed Kristen. She was staring at me, and Randy looked upset. Kristen turned away, but Randy kept looking. Marissa said something with her mouth full, and I didn't catch it. She swallowed, took a sip of wine, then spoke softly. That's not his baby. What do you mean? Of course it is. That's why she left to be with him, have a baby, and start a new family. When was the baby born? Why does it matter? Because there's no way that's his baby, she said, looking into my eyes. I saw a hint of fear and sadness. I didn't get what was happening. It is his, I said again. Look at him, Tyler. He's about 5 or 6, maybe, stocky, with dark hair and really dark skin. Look at the baby. He's big, probably about a year old, and he's even bigger than other babies. Kristen is not that big, and the baby has blonde hair and blue eyes. I could see the blue from here. So what are you saying? I asked, knowing full well what she was implying. You have light brown hair, she said, sipping her wine and looking at Kristen's table. I bet you were blonde when you were little. He's not mine, I said. And you have blue eyes, too. Big blue eyes. Your skin is light, not dark like... What's his name? He's not my baby, I whispered, feeling my voice fade as I counted the months in my head. When was he born? I shrugged. Don't know. She nodded. You might want to find out, she said, pushing her half-eaten dessert aside and drinking the rest of her wine. We left without speaking, and I felt Kristen's eyes on me as we walked by. It's a simple question, I said to Allison, but her eyes wouldn't meet mine, and that told me everything. How long have you known? I pressed. She fidgeted. How long? I raised my voice. It became pretty obvious about 6 months ago, she mumbled. When was he born? Allie shot back. What does that matter? I want his birth date, I said. When was it? August 17th last year, she replied. I did the math in my head. Yeah, it only leaves 2 possibilities. Kristen had been visiting her family a lot in December that year, near the end of our marriage. She probably was with Randy then. Still, it was too possible that the boy could be mine. Why didn't you tell me any of this? A tear formed in Allie's eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered. I should have said something. I know I should have, but I was just scared. She's my cousin. And I'm what? Your friend, and you can't trust me enough to tell me the truth? No, she cried. I love you, Tyler. I always have. But she's my cousin. We are close. She was right. They were close, but that didn't matter to me. If her loyalties were divided, she should have told me. Please say you forgive me, Allie begged, tears running down her face as she reached for me. I pulled away. What has Kristen told you? I asked. She doesn't know, Allie said. She's scared. Scared? Because you're the father and might find out? Because Randy will discover and leave her? Why would he care? He knew the risk when he married her. That baby could be mine, especially since she can't have any more kids, Allie said, sniffling as her tears calmed down and a sad look took over her face. There were problems when Ben was born. She had to have surgery to not have more babies, and Randy wanted kids. 2 or 3. If he finds out that this hill isn't really his, it would be a disaster. I nodded, knowing Kristen could be in big trouble. She could lose her new love because of the mess she got us into. I stood up and walked to the door. Please don't go, Tyler. Please. I paused at the door, my hand on the doorknob, pleading with her. Her sobs became louder and more urgent. I opened the door and left without looking back. I flew to Florida early the next morning. Susan was waiting for me at the gate and hugged me tight. I thought you'd be happier to see me, she whispered in my ear. Sorry, I replied, forcing a smile. Something's come up. She nodded. Marissa told me. I looked at her, my eyes narrowing. How much did she tell you? Just that you may have a son you didn't know about. I nodded. Let's go, we can talk in the car. She smiled and took my hand, leading me to the parking garage. What should I do? I finally asked as we drove. About what? My son? What do you want to do? I thought about it. It was a simple question, but the answer was complicated. I guess I want to know if he's really mine. That's a good idea. So how do I do that? I asked. She focused on the road but bit her lip in thought. You could file a paternity case in Illinois where you filed the Florida divorce. I nodded. That's not really my thing. I've never dealt with divorce either, Susan replied, sensing my hesitation. I sighed, knowing this work was mine to do. I'll call someone in Chicago, Susan offered. They can recommend a good lawyer. Thanks. I stared out the window. We drove in silence until we reached Natalie's office. Here's the great Tyler Collins, a tiny woman in her 60s said as I entered the lobby with Susan. She had pretty makeup, a lot of jewelry, and a sharp business suit. And you must be Natalie, I said, offering my hand. Oh, no, sugar, she said, pulling me into a hug. I don't get to hug many good-looking men these days, not letting this chance go. I hugged her back, smelling smoke on her clothes. You're just as handsome as Susan said, Natalie added as she let go. Maybe even better. I smiled. It wasn't often I got compliments from a woman in her 60s. The receptionist did not react. She was used to Natalie's friendly ways. Susan only laughed. "Well," Natalie said, looking me over, "let's get to the contracts." "Contracts?" I prompted. "Yes," she said, her voice a mix of disappointment and nervous energy. She seemed excited about what we were about to sign. We went into a conference room. Natalie had us sit down and pulled out thick papers for signing. "Here we go," she said. She slid the papers toward me. "Have you seen these?" I asked Susan. "Yes, they're fine," she replied. I flipped through the documents while Susan explained what they meant. "Did you listen to me?" Susan asked when I finished. "Not really." She frowned, and I turned to Natalie. "These are the same terms you told me on the phone?" "Yes, and they're great for a first-time author," Natalie confirmed. "So what's the problem?" I asked, feeling more confident. "I've got you two to support me, and I can write another book in 6 months." "Are you sure?" Susan asked, looking a bit worried. "I'll get it done," I said with a smile. We spent the next hour discussing details that I didn't care much about. We talked about a book tour, TV shows, and who could endorse my book. I nodded along with whatever Natalie suggested. Before I knew it, the meeting was over. Susan and I were back in her car, heading out for lunch. "Okay," she said when we sat down. "Okay what?" I asked, gazing out at the ocean outside the window. "You can take this situation 3 ways. First, you can do nothing. Just always wonder if he's your son." I shot her a glance, not wanting to think about what had been on my mind since Marissa brought it up. "Or," Susan continued, ignoring my look, "you could file a lawsuit, get a paternity test, and if he's yours, then you can get visitation and pay child support." She added, "Child support will be a lot, based on the papers you just signed." I wanted to argue, but she had made her point. "Or you can do the paternity test, and if he's yours, you can do nothing. Maybe she'll just agree to it." I shook my head quickly. "That's not an option for me." "Why?" Susan asked. "Because I can't know I have a son and just leave him out there." She nodded. "So what will you do?" "It's not that easy," I said, my voice rising. "Yes, it is," Susan shot back. "It really is, Tyler. You can either leave things as they are and always wonder, or you can find out and face the truth. Once you choose, it's either A or B. Which one will you pick?" I thought about this while looking at the ocean, and I knew she was right. "Well," she said as the waitress brought our drinks, "choose B." I replied, "I want to know." She smiled and nodded. "Good choice." Then she opened her phone and called her office. "Yes, it's me," she said when someone answered. "Can you connect me to our Chicago office? I need some names for family law." She covered the phone and looked at me. "What county?" "Lincoln," I said. "Lincoln County, Illinois," she told the person on the other end. "Please hurry and call me with names and phone numbers. Thanks." She hung up, laid her napkin in her lap, and said, "Can we relax and enjoy lunch?" We did. I felt better because steps were being taken. When I was getting on my plane home 3 hours later, I had 3 lawyers' names in my pocket and an appointment for the next day with the only one in Grant City. "Take care of yourself, Mr. Best-Selling Author," Susan said, leaning in and giving me a quick peck on the cheek. "You're the hotshot Florida lawyer," I joked, hugging her tightly, realizing that our relationship had now changed to lawyer and client. "So, James McNally," I said, looking up from my divorce papers, "do you think this boy with Walters could be mine?" I nodded. "Why do you believe that?" "He was definitely born while we were still married," I explained. "Were you separated then?" I shook my head. "That happened 2 or 3 weeks later." He nodded. "Did you have any contact with her during that time?" "Just once," I said. "And what about Walters?" I shrugged. "No idea." "Was there a chance they were together?" "I'd bet my life on it. She was in town for a few weeks then, and they were married by the time the boy was born." He nodded. "Did she seem pregnant at the divorce hearing?" "I thought she just looked heavier." He stared at me, thinking through the legal details. "There's more," he said. "He looks like you." I replied, "He has light skin, blonde hair, and blue eyes. Not like Randy. None of those traits are from Kristen either, except the blue eyes. Her hair is dyed, and she is darker skinned." "Okay," he said, leaning in. "Have you thought this through? You could be paying a lot in child support, especially now with your book coming out." "I don't care," I snapped, upset that everyone thought this was about money. "Calm down," he responded. My job is to show you all parts of this situation. You make the choice, but it needs to be a well-informed one. All right, just go ahead, I said. He smiled brightly, showing perfect teeth and a charming dimple in his chin. Am I going to need a tough lawyer for this? I asked. I only need the right kind of lawyer, he replied. Sometimes you need someone to take charge, but at other times, you need a negotiator. I shook my head. Not with her. I need someone tough for Kristen. We'll see how it goes and handle things as they come up, he said. Okay, I replied uncertainly, but he seemed sure. Let's find out if he's your son before we move forward. That made sense, and I felt more relaxed. Deal. Good. We spent the next 20 minutes discussing how he would represent me, the expected costs, and the information he needed to start the lawsuit. When we finished, he looked at me and said, Let's not wait on this. I can have everything ready for you to sign tomorrow morning. Just stop by around 8 and I'll file it when I go to court. I was surprised, but he laughed lightly. It's just a few simple documents to begin. The tougher parts come later once we serve them with the court papers. What about Randy and Kristen? I asked. They will both need to be included since they're married. The boy was born during that marriage, and Randy is likely on the birth certificate. I hadn't thought about that, but it made sense. Still, suing a local cop for a child he thinks is his own was not going to be easy. I won't go even a little over the speed limit until this is done, I promised. And you're okay with this, suing a local cop? I asked. He shrugged. Why would I care? He won't bother me. Really? I pressed. If he does, let me know. I'll deal with it, he assured me. The next morning at 5 to 8, I went to McNally's office. It only took 3 minutes to look over the complaint and sign it. 2 days later, things got chaotic when Kristen and Randy were served with the papers. It was 10:30, and I was in my room, making my dark outline even darker and more intense. After 11 days of working with Marissa, everything was coming together faster this time. I used what I had learned about building suspense along with the new problems in my life, once again caused by Kristen, the love of my life. Then I heard Kristen scream from outside, calling me horrible names. There was pounding on the door and more angry words. I saved my work and backed it up before heading downstairs to answer the door. Dad got there first. Calm down, he was saying to her, but she wouldn't listen. He's trying to ruin me, my marriage, just because I left him for Randy. He's never gotten over it, and now he wants to destroy everything. Bull, you're wrong, Dad yelled back, making her freeze. She had never been spoken to like that before, not even by her dad, and she didn't know how to respond. I stopped at the top of the stairs and watched. Dad was trying to figure out if she had taken his son from him. He's trying to find out if you've stolen my grandson, Dad said, trying to hold back his anger. And you know that's the truth, but he has no right to act that way. Dad looked angrier than I had ever seen him. If that boy is his, then he deserves to know it and be a father to him. Kristen's face was full of shock. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. And you, Kristen, Dad said, pointing at her, you had no right to keep this from him. You know that. So don't come here whining that Tyler did something wrong. We both know that's not true. You're just upset because your perfect little world is about to fall apart. A world built on lies and your own selfish needs. Her eyes found me, and she looked at me as if asking for help. I just raised my eyebrow. Is he wrong? I asked as I walked down the stairs. Are you sure that boy is Randy's? When she didn't answer, I pushed her. You know very well that Ben might be my son. Her face went pale as she realized that Allie had told me. Oh, don't worry, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Your precious family didn't tell me until I made Allie admit it. But Tyler, she stammered, looking from Dad to me, clearly confused about how to deal with both of us. And you've suspected for more than 6 months, I continued. 6 months, and you didn't say a word. What? The doctor said babies don't get darker right away, she protested. It can take a year or more. And he's a year old now, I pointed out. His skin hasn't changed at all, has it? Her face answered for her. I wondered how many nights she had laid in bed, hoping Ben would wake up with darker skin or different hair. So were you ever going to tell me? No, she whispered, staring at the floor. I was just hoping he'd never find out. Dad spoke again, disgust pouring from his words. And now you're angry because he knows? He turned and walked away. Haven't you done enough to him already? You tried to take his son, too. I didn't say anything, just watched Dad leave the room. Then I turned my attention back to Kristen. Have a seat, I said, gesturing to the couch. She walked over and sat down, staring at her lap. Can you tell me what I did that was so wrong? I asked, leaning forward. I loved you more than anything, and you repay that by leaving without a word, without even telling me why. You blow me off, move back here, and can't even explain what I did wrong. What did I do to deserve this? Nothing, she mumbled. It wasn't you. Really? I said, growing frustrated. So now I find out from Mom and Dad that you're getting married before the divorce is even final, and that you're pregnant? And you've been with him all along while we were still together? That's what I deserve? Was I really that terrible? I pushed. She tried to respond, but I wouldn't let her. My editor had dinner with me to celebrate my novel, and she was the one who mentioned that your son might really be mine, not Randy's. Then Allie confirmed you had been worried about the same thing, but you were scared I would find out. She looked at me, her face full of pain. What did I ever do to you? I asked. I never cheated. I worked hard to give you everything you wanted. You weren't there for me, she cried, tears streaming down her face. I was alone. I didn't know anyone, and you were always gone. That's not true, I shouted, making her shrink back. I had to work hard when we moved. I had to keep earning so you could have that perfect house and your shopping sprees. You could have gotten a job or made friends to help us, but you just wanted everything without working for it. You wanted me to always be there for you, but you were never satisfied. You wanted everything to just come to you. She was crying openly now, and for some reason I felt better. I had been hurting for a long time because of her, and I wanted her to feel some of that hurt back. So how's that working out for you, Kristen? Is Randy always there for you? Or are those late nights wearing you down? I asked. How's that tiny little apartment working for your growing family? The look on her face told me I had hit a nerve. She realized she had made a mistake, and she knew it. Now she understood that. I understood it too. Which is worse, Kristen? I said, leaning closer. Is it better to never see your husband but have nice things? Or to never see him and live in a small, run-down apartment while getting clothes from the thrift store? At least I have my family now, she shouted back. And my son. Not for long, I warned her, and not if I can help it. You wouldn't do that, she gasped, her face full of shock. You wouldn't take Ben from me? He doesn't even know you. And whose fault is that? I shot back. How do you think a judge will see that? You can't keep my own son from me. Don't even think about it, she hissed. You'll never take my son. What about Randy? I pressed on. How will he feel when he finds out Ben isn't his, especially since you can't have any more kids? Forget you, she spat. I've been through this before. I stood up and walked to the door. And you should know that after being with others, it wasn't even that great. Her mouth dropped open, stunned that anyone would talk to her like that. I opened the door and held it for her. See you in court, Kristen, you and Randy both. She tossed her purse over her shoulder and stormed past me without another word. She jumped into her car, slammed the door, and sped off without looking back. I felt both happy and sad. Happy that I stood my ground, but sad that she would fight hard to keep me from my son. The chaos inside me matched the new outline I finished 2 days later. It's funny how writing works. The more you write, the easier it gets. You write faster and make fewer mistakes. This was especially true for my second book. I knew the characters so well. It felt natural to write their words. The story took place just 40 miles from my home in Rockford, Illinois, a place I had visited many times. It was also easier to picture the scenes, the mood, the weather, and the old abandoned buildings. It helped that I was spending 12 hours a day writing. I woke up every day at 6, worked in the wood shop from 7 to 11, and then wrote until I was too tired to stay awake. The pages just filled themselves, and I was almost halfway through the first draft. When my first court date came about a month after Kristen confronted me, I sat with my dad in a busy courtroom. I was amazed at how little seems to get done in court. The benches were packed with angry people going through divorces. Lawyers were rushing around, shuffling papers and whispering last-minute deals to each other. Every few minutes, another group of lawyers was called to the front by the judge. She was about 60 years old, and her bored expression showed how tiring the process was for her. After sitting for about 20 minutes, I saw James McNally move to the front of the line. When the case before them finished, he spotted me and nodded for me to come forward. Collins against Collins, now known as Walters, Judge Glass said as I approached. Good morning, Your Honor, McNally said. James McNally for the plaintiff. Mr. Collins is here to my left. Sandra Petrosky is for Mrs. Walters. A small, plain-looking woman was introduced as Mrs. Walters as Kristen squeezed her way through the crowd. I noticed Randy glaring at her from across the courtroom as he stepped forward from the jury box. And what are we here for? Judge Glass asked. The lawyers glanced at each other and two nodded at McNally. My client was married to Mrs. Walters, he explained in a calm voice. Their marriage ended in Florida about 18 months ago. We're asking to reopen the case here. Judge Glass waved her hand, signaling him to get to the main point. Well, Your Honor, he continued, Mrs. Walters had a son about a year ago, and we want to set up child support. The baby isn't even confirmed to be my client's child, McNally said, so we want an order for a DNA test. Despite how strange the situation was, Judge Glass seemed unbothered, as if he had just read a shopping list. Miss Petrosky, she said, looking at Kristen's lawyer, do you challenge this request? Yes, Your Honor, Petrosky replied. The judge then turned to Randy's lawyer, who quickly said, My client agrees to the testing. Oh, he does? Judge Glass replied, catching a glare from Kristen before turning back to me and then to Randy. Is there any reason I shouldn't grant this request? Judge Glass asked Petrosky. Well, she started, but the judge interrupted. Is there any chance that Mr. Collins is this child's father? Petrosky paused, then glanced at Kristen, looking for input. Do you want me to ask your client in open court? Judge Glass said, leaning closer and speaking more softly. Kristen lowered her head. No, Your Honor, Petrosky said, noticing Kristen's defeated shoulders. He agreed to sign the judgment and said they would take a DNA test for the mother and child. Good, the judge replied, leaning back. Give me an order. We all nodded and walked away. What just happened in there? I asked McNally as we stood outside the courtroom. Randy's right. Something bad happened, McNally said. You mean, I started, but he nodded. She told him she hadn't been with you for months. No way it can be your child. He thought for a moment. And now that she had to tell the truth, it's going to cause trouble in Pleasantville, he finished. I laughed. What's so funny? Walter asked from behind me. I turned around to see him there, fists tight with anger. His jaw was clenched and I could see the tension in his face. What's wrong, Randy? Surprised? She lied to you about being with me, I said. Hall stepped closer, putting himself between us. Calm down, he said. McNally grabbed my shoulder firmly. And what will you do if Ben is my son? I asked, leaning over Hall's shoulder to look at Randy. Are you going to leave her, the love of your life? His jaw moved as he clenched his teeth, glaring at me but not saying a word. Yeah, I thought so, I said. You have no idea. Welcome to the club. I turned back to McNally, nodded, and walked away. What is so special about Kristen? What does she have that makes everyone go weak? Why do people put up with her nonsense and beg for her forgiveness when she gets upset? Well, her amazing looks certainly help. Kristen is 30 now, but she still has the body of a cheerleader. Or maybe it's her pretty face that looks like it came from a cosmetics ad. She has bright eyes, a cute nose, and lips that seem to mix playfulness and charm perfectly, all framed by beautiful, thick blonde hair. With just her looks, most men would melt and do what she wants. But there's more. She can be cute, sweet, and full of joy, and then shift to being very charming. She knows how to look at men, making them feel like they are the only one for her. I know she has given me that look many times. Sometimes it was to make me do what she wanted, sometimes to calm me down. Once in a while, it was just to make me happy. Add to that she is smart, fun, and great to be around, and she is a complete package. Her only flaw is that she was spoiled as a child and grew up wanting everything her way. If Kristen wants something, she makes sure she gets it or there's trouble. But in all our years together, I never thought she would just leave me to get what she wanted. Poor Randy should have seen that side of her. He is only 3 years older than us and has known us both, even if it was only from a distance. He knew she was married when she started visiting and flirting with him. He knew she didn't mind cheating and doing what she wanted. Oh, he had to know all of that. Honestly, I felt a bit sorry for him. Sure, he helped end my marriage, but Kristen is the one who played the game. She owed me honesty and loyalty, not him. If things were switched, I'm not sure how I would have dealt with it. Let's be honest. It's easy to say how we would act if we had the chance. But things change when a stunning woman is interested in you and her husband is far away. Still, I was glad that Randy was going through what I had faced. In fact, I thought he wasn't suffering nearly enough. After all, they had been together for only 2 years. Let her do this to him after 12 years, when he is the one married to her. I'd been with her for so long, and she left me without a second thought. I was still better looking, earned more money, and was nicer than that little jerk. So take that, Randy. Dad and I were at the rehab center. I had been going 3 times a week for about an hour each time, but Mom's progress was slow. Dad was there every day for 5 or 6 hours to help with her therapy, but he was still impatient. She's ready to go home, the doctor said again. But she can barely talk, Dad argued. The doctor said it just needed time and practice. Will her walking get better? Dad asked. The doctor nodded. Listen, it's not like we are just sending her home. She will have physical therapy 5 days a week. They will come to the house for an hour each day, Monday through Friday, and she will see a speech therapist 3 times a week. The therapist will work with all of you to help improve her speech. Then why can't she just stay here? I asked. Because the insurance won't allow it, the doctor explained. She has reached a point where it is cheaper to provide therapy at home. But she won't get as much therapy at home, Dad insisted. Actually, she will, the doctor said, sounding tired of the discussion. She will get the same amount of time with the therapists each week as she gets now. You're the one helping her with her exercises, not the therapists. But we don't have the equipment at home, Dad pressed. The insurance will pay to rent and set it all up at home, the doctor replied. You'll have everything you need. What if I just pay for her to stay here? I asked. The doctor looked at me like I was out of my mind. I have more than enough money for her stay, I insisted. But he just shook his head. You'd be wasting your money, he replied. Honestly, she should have gone home a week ago. Why is the home better? I wondered. The doctor explained. She feels more at ease in her own place. Once she's there, she'll get better much faster than here. You and your dad just need to follow the advice from the physical therapist and speech therapist. If you're going to do anything, do it all, even a bit more. I glanced at my dad, who didn't seem so sure. I turned back to the doctor. If her recovery doesn't go well, they can let us know here, and we'll see what we should do next, he said. He paused, looking at both of us. He sighed, but then his face softened. He'd seen many families doubt him before. Trust me. You'll see for yourselves. I know it's hard to believe, but she has made great progress here. We expect her speech to return mostly, and most of the use of her right side will come back too. There will be some lasting weakness, especially in her face and grip. But honestly, she's doing much better than any of us thought. All right, Dad said. We'll give it a try. When will she go home? I asked. Saturday, he replied. But that's only 2 days from now, Dad said for me. We've already arranged for delivery of the equipment you need tomorrow. Can someone be there between 9 and noon? I can, I said. He nodded. Good. Then let's get it ready. The doorbell rang at 9:30 the next morning. Morning, said Denny with his cheerful round face. Denny, I said, shaking his hand. What are you doing here? Delivery, he said, looking around the living room. And you're not ready for it, are you? I looked around. How much is there? I asked. A lot, he replied as he came inside. We'll need to move a lot of this stuff out of the way, he said with a bright smile. How are you doing, by the way? I replied, I'm good, Denny. It's nice to see you. Good to see you, too. I've been back for a while, but have been busy, I explained. Yeah, he said, getting serious. Sorry about your mom. She was a great lady. Thanks, I said, and he nodded. Then he picked up one end of the coffee table and motioned for me to help with the other end. Let's move this to the side for now, he said. After we get everything in and set up, we'll see what stays and what goes to the basement. Okay? I asked. You always do this. Nope, he said, lifting the table easily. But you were my quarterback. We have a special bond between a center and a quarterback. He winked as he put down the table. You were always close to me during games, I laughed. Well, it was nice. Yeah, he mused as he grabbed the couch. But you could have bought me dinner or something. Instead, you just felt all over me. The rest of the moving went the same way, with laughter and stories about high school and our lives since then. I was surprised to learn that Denny was more than just a mover. He owned the company. He had insisted on making this delivery when he saw my address and purposely didn't bring a helper so I could catch up with him. "Why haven't you come around?" he asked, as we took a break after moving the gear into the house. I shrugged. "I've been busy, I guess, living in Florida and trying to get things together." "Did you?" he asked. "Sure," I said, "but it came at a cost." "Aw, sorry to hear that," he said. We spent the next half hour setting up the hospital bed and the therapy equipment, and then we rearranged the living room and moved some things to the basement. "Okay," he said, rubbing his hands together. "This should work for now." I looked around and nodded. "You know," he said, turning to look at me seriously, "a group of us from high school gets together on Friday nights. Some of us still live here." I nodded. "It's at our house tonight, around 6:30 or 7. I know they'd love to see you," he said. "Kristen's been there a few times," I told him. He nodded, his smile fading a bit. "Not many, but sometimes I think about it. I couldn't just hide away." "So what should I bring?" I asked. He grinned. "An appetizer and whatever you want to drink." "Deal," I said, shaking his hand with a bit of excitement. He shook mine with a firm grip, then looked at his hand after the handshake finished. "I'm not letting you escape that easily," he said, placing a bill on the hospital bed. "I covered for you back in school, and I'll do it now." "Then take your wife and kids out to dinner with it," I suggested. "I owe you a lot of dinners." He just laughed. "No way. You're not getting off that easily. I want a real night out." We laughed together, and then he headed out. I stopped writing at 6 and started to prepare for the party at Denny's house. 45 minutes later, I was dressed in jeans and a long-sleeved white shirt, with the sleeves rolled up to my elbows. I drove into the Denny's neighborhood, which was new and on the edge of Granite City. There were already about 10 cars parked in the driveway and along the road. I could hear laughter and talking from the back as I took a case of beer and a tray of hummus and pita chips from my car. As I rounded the corner of the house and walked toward the big deck where everyone was gathered, I was greeted by Tyler's cheerful, "Hey, dudes," and "What's up, partners?" Dee Dee, Denny's small wife, came over and gave me a quick kiss on the cheek. She took the tray of hummus from me and said, "The beer goes in the coolers over there." I nodded and said, "Thanks for having me." She replied, "Thanks for coming," looking truly happy to see me. Dee Dee had graduated a few years after us, and I remembered her as a small girl with a tomboy look. She was still small, much smaller than Denny, but now she had cute features that made her look really pretty. "Keep your Skinner's offer," Denny laughed from a group of guys, cutting into my thoughts. I chuckled and poured my beers into the cooler, saving one for myself. I opened it and took a sip before joining Denny and his friends. The gathering felt like a high school party, but with a mix of ages. About 35 people were there, including some familiar faces and others I recognized from living in Granite City. We chatted for a while, catching up and sharing stories about who was married, who had kids, and what jobs everyone had. I had been there for about an hour when I heard a voice I recognized. "Hello, Tyler." I tensed, knowing this moment could happen. I forced a smile and turned around. "Hello, Kristen." The group I was with stepped back and whispered among themselves while glancing at us. "Did you get to the clinic yet? You need to give him your DNA," she said. I shook my head. "Next Friday, he's yours," she replied. I narrowed my eyes, not sure what she was trying to do. "Can we talk for a few minutes somewhere a little less public?" she asked. After thinking for a moment, I nodded and walked into the house. We chose a sofa in the den and closed the door. "I didn't know," she started, her voice low and her eyes on the floor. "But you knew it was possible," I replied. She nodded. "And when you suspected, you didn't tell me?" I asked, looking straight at her. "You ever have dreams?" she asked quietly, almost to herself. "Because I used to have them all the time. And sometimes, if you're lucky, your dreams come true. But then you learn they aren't as great as you thought." She looked at me, her eyes locked onto mine. "So what was your dream, Kristen?" "Mine was to be with you forever, to have a family, never to worry about money, to live in a big house with lots of kids." Ward and June Cleaver, I said, thinking of the ideal family. She agreed, Ward and June Cleaver. And just when we almost had it, you left me for him, I said. She looked down and mumbled something. What? I leaned in closer. I didn't leave you for him. I left you for my dreams, she said, looking up nervously. I didn't think I would get my dreams with you. I thought you'd keep working all the time, and I would be alone in that house. And when you came back here? I asked, wondering how her sister fit into this. Scylla told me I didn't belong in Florida. She said you were selfish, keeping me at home and not starting a family. I nodded, knowing her sister had influenced her. And my family? She pressed. Mom and Dad kept saying how much they missed me and wanted grandkids. They wanted me to come back. You never once suggested we sell the place down there and move back here, I said, trying not to raise my voice. I know, but would you have done it? I guess we'll never know, I shrugged. We were quiet for a moment, and then I said, the second I found out my mom had a stroke, I sold everything and came back here fast. So we do know, I said. If you'd have told me, I would have moved back. She nodded. That's what I thought. Then why didn't you? She paused before answering. I figured you didn't love me anymore. Based on what? I asked. I don't know. You worked so much and didn't have time to listen. And when you got back here? I pressed. Randy treated you like a queen, she sighed, which said enough for both of us. And now? I asked. He's already filed for divorce, she said. I found out yesterday. Why? That's all so sudden. He says he feels humiliated. I lied and let him think Ben was his. Now he'd have to tell everyone Ben isn't his? I asked. She nodded. We fell silent for a few minutes. I could see she wanted to say something but was holding back. Go ahead, I said gently. Ask whatever you want. She shook her head and I placed my hand over hers. Why, Allie? She finally asked. Was it to get back at me? I laughed quietly. No, not everything is about you, Kristen. I paused, thinking about why I had been with Allie. Well, I think this is partly about you. Why do you ask? Because she was there when I needed someone, and I felt comfortable with her. I found her attractive, too. Also, she reminded me a lot of you. But no, I didn't spend time with her to make you upset or hurt you. This was a year ago. I might have done that back then, but not now. Are you going to give her another chance? She looked worried, and I could tell she hoped not. No, I'm pretty sure that chance is gone. Is it because of me? Because she kept my secret? Yes and no. No, it's not about you. Yes, because if she really loved me like she said, she should have told me these things. She couldn't keep something like that from me. I feel like she would have taken that secret to her grave. It's not her fault, Kristen said. Yes, it is. She made her choice. Well, what now? Can we ever be friends again? Tyler? I thought about it. I don't know. Can you ever forgive me? I paused, unsure of the feelings inside me. What do you want from me, Kristen? She looked me in the eyes. She tried to smile, but couldn't. Are you thinking about getting back together? Her tiny nod almost slipped past me. I couldn't believe what she was suggesting. We're back here, she said. Back home. And now we have a little boy together. If you can forgive me, well, I would listen better. I would appreciate you the way I should have all along. I felt her hand gently holding mine, so familiar and warm. Say something, she whispered. At least say you'll think about it. I couldn't answer. All right, I need to explain what I'm feeling. 2 years ago, the love of my life just left without a word. She married another man, a man she was with while still married to me and now has a baby. Now, I find out the baby might be mine, and her new husband has left, so she's single again. Now I learn she doesn't hate me. She hates herself for leaving me, even if she's still sad about her own choices. And she might want to get back with me. So what do? Do I tell her to leave me alone? It's easy to say that if she wasn't the love of my life. It's even harder considering we have a child together, and we will be connected for the next 17 years wanting to give little Ben a good life. Do I say yes? I want to be together again. Great. Now I have to wonder if she'll just leave me again for someone else. I also worry if she wants me back because she really loves me or just because she has no one else. Tyler, she said in my ear, her warm breath pulling me back to reality. Okay, I mumbled, wanting some space. Sure, I'll think about it. Thanks, she said, relief on her face. There wasn't any pride there, though. I noticed that the Kristen I knew would have looked proud of herself for getting her way. That look was gone. Was she genuine this time? Let's go out and see some people I haven't seen in a while, she said. Okay, I replied. She nodded and pulled me to my feet, leading me back to the deck. When we got there, I saw Allie talking to a group in the yard. Our eyes met, and then her gaze shifted, spotting Kristen holding my hand. Her expression tightened before she quickly turned away and smiled at someone in her group. The rest of the evening was spent talking with old friends and meeting new ones. Kristen wasn't clingy, but she was always close by. At one point, I saw her and Allie whispering and sneaking glances at me. Just what I needed, more drama. The next day, Dad and I helped Mom settle back in. We spent hours arranging things the way she liked and fussing over her, clueless as we were. I had seen Mom a lot since her stroke, but it felt sad now that she was home. She looked small and frail in a loose sweatsuit sitting in her chair. She was 58 but looked much older. Her hair was messy and grayer. Her skin looked pale and thin, and she could only speak slowly, her words sometimes slurred and only using her left hand to point. Her right arm lay useless at her side. "Come on," I said once everything was in place. I took her right arm and did the exercises we were told to do with her. That first day back was all about exercise and practice, while we listened to a baseball game on TV. There was one funny moment when Dad brought her dinner to the table. "What's this?" she asked. "It's your favorite meal," he said proudly. "Pot roast with potatoes and carrots." "Really?" she replied, looking at him skeptically. After having Dad's pot roast every week, I agreed with her doubtful glance. Then the doorbell rang. "Kristen," I said, surprised to see her standing there with Ben in one arm and a basket in the other. "Take him," she said, handing me the toddler. She walked past me into the house. "What are you doing?" Dad asked when he saw her. "Sorry about the last time I was here," Kristen interrupted. "I really am sorry. You were right about everything." Dad nodded, looking at her and then at little Ben squirming in my arms. I moved my hips gently and held onto him tightly. Kristen walked past Dad and into the dining room, then into the kitchen, calling back to us. "They said at church this morning that Sally was coming home today, so I thought she shouldn't have to eat bad food on her first day." Mom laughed softly. "Too late," she said. Dad frowned, looking from the kitchen to Mom and then to me. Then he focused on the little boy in my arms and his face softened. "Let him down," Dad said, bending down and holding out his arms. I told him to bend down and he waddled over to Dad. "Is he?" Mom asked, looking back and forth between me and Ben. The happy look on one side of her face said it all. "Your grandson," Kristen said from the doorway, leaning against the doorframe and taking it all in. She smiled but looked tense, waiting for questions that didn't come. Instead, Dad picked up Ben and placed him in Mom's lap. I never thought I would see her this happy again. The extra years seemed to disappear. When I turned around, I noticed that Kristen had gone back into the kitchen. She stopped when she heard me coming. "Thanks," I said. "This is—" I paused, and she understood what I meant. She relaxed and went back to preparing lunch. "I'm not hungry," I said, when she picked up another plate. She turned to look at me. "Really?" I smiled. "Just not hungry." She looked disappointed, like her first try at winning me back didn't work out as hoped. "I'll help you feed Ben," I said. "Now that I've got a son, I should learn how to care for him, right?" She smiled, happy to hear that. A few minutes later, Dad helped Mom to the dining room table, and we all sat down for lunch. Kristen sat beside Mom, chatting about Ben and sharing stories about raising kids. She even used her napkin to dab at Mom's mouth. She looked like the sweet, charming girl I'd fallen for. Dad ate his fried chicken, mashed potatoes, and gravy, sharing bites with a messy Ben, who was sitting on my lap and getting food everywhere. "Cute," Mom said, looking at Ben and me, her eyes bright. Kristen saw the mess and laughed. "Welcome to fatherhood," she said, but her eyes showed that she felt sad. I just smiled. "I've got some catching up to do," I said. She tried to smile back, and Dad added, "Better late than never." He picked up his plate and took it to the sink. "You doing okay, Ma?" he asked. Mom nodded, her eyes still on Ben as she chewed slowly. "I'm fine," Kristen said. "Let me help you." She stood up and went to the sink, rinsing the plate and putting it in the dishwasher while cleaning up the leftover food. She had brought enough for 3 meals and took her time putting it in the fridge and wiping the counter. I wiped Ben's mouth and slid over to sit next to Mom, whispering to Ben about Grandma and chicken at the table. I didn't really know what to say. I just knew Mom seemed happy with him around. When Kristen finished, she turned and stopped. It looked harder for her than I had thought. Her face showed regret and sadness, almost begging for forgiveness. She tried to talk, but only cleared her throat. "I need some fresh air," she said, and hurried to the back door and outside. I looked at Mom and Dad. "Come on," Dad said, holding out his arms. "My turn." I passed Ben over the table into Dad's strong arms. I went outside to find Kristen. She was huddled around the side of the wood shop, smoking a cigarette and trying not to cry. "When did you start this again?" I asked. She looked at the cigarette in her hand. "Sorry," she said, moving to throw it away. "No, go ahead if it helps you." She nodded, took a deep breath, and spoke as the smoke came out with her words. "I just never thought it would be this hard. You know, if you hadn't come back, I wouldn't have to see you again. It would have made things easier. I wished I had never kept the secret about Ben." She shook her head. "No, not that. Honestly, I began to realize what a mess I made when his hair didn't change and his eyes stayed blue." She looked at me, searching for a reaction, but I stayed quiet and listened. "I shouldn't have done any of it," she said, her voice flat. "I never should have listened to my mom or to Scylla. I kept dreaming about what could have been instead of focusing on what we had." She laughed sadly. "I traded loneliness for misery. You thought I was perfect, and Randy wanted me for the wrong reasons. I mistook his desire for love. When he found out I was pregnant, he asked me to marry him. I'm not sure he really loved me, but he loved the idea of having me and a son. And honestly, I don't know what I want." "What don't you know?" I asked. "He wasn't," she started. "You okay?" She spoke, and the tears she had been holding back finally flowed. "He just wasn't you. All I wanted was you. I would have left him in a second if I thought you would take me back. I would crawl through mud for a chance to be with you again, but it was too late. I had messed everything up. So I decided to live in the dream I had created for myself." "But why now?" I asked. "Is it just because Randy is gone?" "He didn't leave," she said. "I moved out. Me and Ben the day after you served me with the papers. That surprised me. So when you were in court, we've been separated for a month. Then why did you... What was that? You contested the DNA test? You're trying to take him away from me?" she whispered. My anger grew. "Is that what this is about now?" "No," she cried. "That was about court. But not now, Tyler. That's not why I'm here now. I'm here to show you that I've changed." She looked at me, her face wet with tears, some of her hair stuck to her cheeks. "Can't you see? You believe me, right?" "I see a scared girl," I said. "A girl who's wasted her life so far and is scared of losing what little she has left." She shook her head. "No, Tyler, that's not true. I want us to be friends. Even if you never want me back, I still don't want you to hate me." "You can hate me if you want," I said, keeping quiet. "I know about your book," she said. "I know you have enough money to take me to court. I know that, Tyler. Allie told me about the book, and they think you'll be famous, but I don't want that. I don't want any of it." She turned away, wiping her face with her hands, trying to stop crying. "Tyler, if you let me keep Ben, I'll never stop you from seeing him. I don't want any of your money. I can support him myself. But I want him to know his father now. I know I was wrong. You have no reason to trust me, I know that. But I'm asking you to. Please give me a chance. And you're sure he's mine?" Kristen sat on the ground, her back against the wall, hugging her knees. "When you came back to town, I was worried this might happen. I went online and got a DNA kit. I took some DNA from Randy while he was sleeping and swabbed Ben's, too. I mailed it in. There's no way Randy is the father." She looked at me, seeing the doubt on my face. "You'll understand if I don't trust you on this one," I said. She just kept looking at me. "Who else have you been with?" I asked. "No one," she replied. "Just you and Randy, my whole life. Just the two of you." She gave a sad smile. "Probably why I wasn't so good, like you said. Maybe I should have read more or watched some shows. I sat beside her. Well, I said, looking at the woods, I may have made that sound worse than it was. She elbowed me. What? Were you exaggerating? Well, I guess a little. She turned to look at me. Her red eyes and tear-stained face still looked good to me. She smiled, and her eyes lit up. I noticed her glance down at me, then back to my eyes. Maybe more than a little, she teased, nudging me over. Hey, I protested, but she just laughed. Come on, she said, walking back to the house, swinging her hips as she went. Time to get Ben down for a nap. When we got back inside, Ben was already asleep on his mom's lap. She gently stroked his hair while Dad watched from across the room, giving them space. I went upstairs with Kristen and showed her my new book. She liked the outline and the story I had written so far, but she felt sad when she realized the ex-wife character was based on her. You think that's bad? I said, pulling out my first book. Read this. We spent the next few hours talking about old times, laughing about people we knew, and enjoying each other's company. But there was something tense in the air that I couldn't ignore. The doctor had said Mom's recovery at home was faster than we thought. After 3 weeks, she was walking on her own with just a little limp. Most of the slurred speech was gone, and we could understand her. A lot of that was thanks to Kristen bringing Ben to visit every afternoon. I think she wanted a reason to see me, but I was busy with my writing. I could only spare an hour to play with Ben on the floor, feed him lunch, or watch him sleep with Mom. Once he was napping, I returned to my work trying to finish the second book. I had little time to sleep. Kristen hung around for a couple of days trying to talk to me, but I made it clear that chatting wasn't happening, and she gave up trying. After the first week, Kristen only spent the first hour playing with Ben and then came back after dinner to pick him up. She seemed perfectly happy to let Mom and Dad spend time with him. I was spending 2 or 3 hours a day with my son while Mom and Dad spent most of the afternoon with him. You might have noticed that I called Ben my son just now. That's because the DNA test showed he was mine just 5 days after I sent in my sample. He was my son, no doubt about it. This changed everything about my case against Kristen. We handled most of it around James McNally's conference table. McNally started by saying, "I've made a simple plan for today's meeting." He handed out a piece of paper, and as I read it, I saw it was straightforward. 1, custody. 2, support. 3, visitation. There was plenty of space on the nearly blank page to write notes about each topic. "Jammer," Petrosky said, "we're not ready to talk about any of this, and you know it. We still don't have all of Mr. Collins's financial information. He has a book coming out soon." "I know that, Sandy," he replied. "But we can begin outlining things, and you can tell me what else you need." "That's not necessary," Kristen interrupted, looking at me. "No," she said, leaning across the table, reaching for my hand. I wasn't sure where this was going, but I took her hand, holding it gently. "I wasn't joking when I said what I did that day," she said softly, squeezing my hand tightly. "I'm sorry. I know I had no right to keep him from you. At first, I didn't know he was yours. I didn't even suspect it until he was 5 or 6 months old. I should have told you when I found out." I stared at her, unable to move. Her jaw was tight, like she was trying to stay calm and finish what she needed to say. "You have every right to seek custody of Ben," she went on. "I know you have a strong chance of getting it, but I'm asking you not to. Tyler, please, for Ben's sake, don't do it." "What are you offering then?" McNally asked in a gentle voice. "We're thinking—" Petrosky tried to speak before Kristen interrupted her. "If you want custody, I won't fight it," Kristen said. "Just make sure I have enough time to see my son, our son." She struggled to keep her emotions in check, but her strong tone showed me she meant what she said. I had a lot to think about. After about 10 seconds, I made my decision. "Joint custody," I said. "You can be the main parent, Kristen. I'm not taking Ben from you, but I want to see him a lot." She nodded, wiping away the tears streaming down her cheeks. "Okay," Petrosky said with relief. "Now what about child support?" "I don't want any," Kristen replied. "Tyler will do what's right." I shook my head. $250 a week, and I'll cover health insurance and medical bills. I'll also set up his college fund." "I don't want your money," Kristen insisted. "That's not enough," Petrosky said, turning to McNally. "The courts will give much more." "Not a dime," Kristen said. "I have to insist." I'm saying this, I added, smiling at Kristen. I don't want our son to live poorly just because you feel bad. Okay? Kristen sniffed, half laughing, half crying as her tears calmed down. Visitation, McNally said. Generous, I replied. I think what we have right now is good, Kristen said. I see him every day. You've got to see him sometime, don't you? I asked. I'm starting a job soon, she said with a smile. I'll be teaching at the grade school. One of the teachers is going on maternity leave, and they offered me a contract. I hope you and your folks can look after him while I work. You're going to work? I asked, surprised more by that than her visitation idea. She nodded, smiling. I know it's late to be doing this, but better late than never, right? I was shocked. She was really trying. Holidays and weekends, McNally said. We'll work something out, I agreed. Just write it down for us and we can finalize everything. Kristen's lawyer, Petrosky, looked worried as she saw the plan coming together. You need to think about this. You're giving up a lot here. Kristen looked at her with a sad but patient expression. I've thought about it a lot, Sandy. I'm doing what's best for Tyler and Ben. I will manage, and I won't take advantage of Tyler to do it. I need to stand on my own. Kristen turned to me, and I felt joy at seeing Ben every day and sadness at how much Kristen had gone through. Tyler will never disappoint me, she said to Petrosky, looking straight at me. Then her eyes brightened, and she said to me, as much as I wish it were different. I just smiled. That night, I called Marissa. It was late, almost 11:30, but she answered quickly. Hello? She asked. Hi, I replied. Fine. What do you want? She asked. I want to take you to lunch tomorrow, I said. Why? Because of you. I now have a son to get to know. There was silence. You don't owe me anything, she said softly. But I do. It's more than just lunch. Really? She was quiet again, and I was ready to speak when she finally said, Do you want me to come out there? I have a photo shoot in the morning, I said. Somewhere in Lincoln Park for the book cover. I'll be there anyway. Since I was there, I thought it was the least I could do. She said it sounded perfect. Where do you want to meet? I'll pick you up, I offered. I already have your address in my GPS, I added. I got it from Susan. It's really no trouble, I said. Okay, she replied. See you at 12:50. When I arrived, Marissa was waiting on the curb for me. She hadn't changed since we last met. Her hair was still big and spiky, and she wore black eyeliner and lipstick with black clothes. She had a jean jacket on to stay warm in the autumn chill. What do you feel like eating? I asked, opening her door before running to my side of the car to avoid getting a ticket for parking illegally. Whatever, she said. You're going to have to help me. I focused on the narrow street lined with cars. Turn right up ahead, she said simply. 5 minutes later, we arrived at Baba Araba on Halsted Street. That was the name on the big sign, and luckily they had valet parking. It was a Spanish restaurant, a place I had only visited a few times before. I let Marissa order our food, and she chose well. We had grilled octopus, a potato salad with garlic, goat cheese, and a light tomato sauce with grilled bread for dipping. The appetizers just kept coming. There was enough food for an army. Marissa loved every bite. I managed to take a few bites here and there. She finished everything quickly. We chatted and caught up. School was going well for her, and she was even starting to outline a novel. I got the idea while I was working with you, she said, but didn't share more. Instead, she asked me about the book cover photo shoot I had done that morning. Just then, a loud voice interrupted us. Do you really think that's appropriate? A woman shouted from behind us as we were finishing our meal. I turned to see a group of older people with blue hair giving us dirty looks as they left. They were staring at Marissa with clear disapproval. Did we do something to upset you? I asked. The look they gave me was like I had annoyed them. This is a nice restaurant, one man said, eyeing Marissa in a judging way. I thought the people here had better manners. I shot back. I guess that's not something they check at the door. The women gasped, and the men glared. Marissa laughed silently, trying not to spit out her food. If it would help, I continued, we could try offending you even more, like interrupting your lunch. Marissa was now covering her mouth with her napkin, trying not to laugh. The group of older folks huffed and put on their fancy coats and scarves before making their way to the exit. I saw them stop to say something to the receptionist, looking very upset. I'm sorry, Marissa said when I turned back to her. About what? I asked. She resumed her meal quietly. Will there be anything else? Asked a waitress who appeared out of nowhere. Her expression showed she didn't want any trouble. Is there a problem? I asked. She quickly looked at the manager standing by the receptionist, then back at me, pleading for help. I'd like a cup of espresso, I said, and my guest will have dessert. Marissa frowned, clearly wanting to leave. You choose the dessert, I told the waitress, and a glass of wine to go with it if you don't mind. Why are you doing this? Marissa asked when the waitress left. Because I'm happy to be with you, and I'm enjoying myself, I replied. I won't let a bunch of rude people ruin our lunch. She smiled softly, and then she enjoyed the dessert. They brought her 2 desserts. For the next 2 months, my routine was the same. Work in the shop in the morning, then write for an hour or 2 until late at night. Get up. Do it all over again. Kristen still tried to spend time with me, showing interest in everything I did. I appreciated her, but I just didn't know if I could love her again. My new novel was coming along well, though I hadn't thought of a title yet. I was nearly finished with the first draft. This one was darker than the first one I had written. Kristen looked at me after reading the outline. Yeah, you still hate me, don't you? I asked. Where is that coming from? She replied. This book has a lot of anger in it, she said, studying me closely. The silence grew thicker. Then she came closer, leaned over, and kissed me. It wasn't a romantic kiss, but it wasn't just a friendly one either. I'm more sorry than you'll ever know, she whispered. I tried to smile, and she took that chance to sit on my lap and put her arms around me. If my family hadn't been downstairs with Ben, and if it wasn't so long since I had any contact with a woman, I might have pushed her away. But I didn't. I know I ruined it, she said, looking into my eyes. I hate myself for it. It's been hard for me. Then why? I asked. Because I was spoiled, and you wouldn't give in to me, she said. I tried. You know that, right? I thought you wanted me to be that way. You just wouldn't meet me halfway. She nodded. I know, Tyler. It was never your fault. You have to believe that. I absent-mindedly stroked her arms as she held me. Yeah, she murmured. But it wasn't that he was better than you. He stood for something better, something I thought was better back then. But I never wanted anyone else but you. I was so caught up in what she was saying that I didn't even notice her moving closer to me. You can hate me, she said softly. I know you do, and I get that. I hated you too, especially when you were with Allie. That didn't change anything. I know how good you were, she told me in a way I didn't want to hear. It just made me sad that I used to have you. I said I was the one who got dumped, but then I found out you were with him even before we were done, while you were still living with me. We weren't even separated, let alone divorced. She nodded and bit her lip. I recognized that look. I knew she was close to something. What are you doing? I whispered. You hate me, she said. I want you to let it out on me, too. She trembled. So what was that? It's been so long, she said. Please. You want me to let it out on you to hurt you? And you just made me feel bad. And I am still here listening to you. Guilt crossed her face and her eyes looked down. I'm sorry, she said. Just a minute ago you were all fired up to get me worked up, I whispered. Why the change? She looked up, and I saw tears in her eyes. I didn't mean it that way. I thought so, I said, stepping back after a long pause. Then Kristen spoke. You've changed so much. You broke my heart. Kristen, what did you expect? Gratitude? Not all this anger, she said. I'm not angry, I said. I just think you're playing games with me. Games? I don't have time for that. She tried to talk a few times but stopped. I decided to wait her out, but by the 6th time I lost my patience. Just say it, will you? I'm sorry, she said. It was about a little while ago. It's just that I have been thinking. Thinking about what? You know, a friends with benefits kind of thing. I want to be with you. If that's the only way I can be, then let's do it. I shook my head. I did enough of that when we divorced. Enough for a lifetime. Then let's just go on a date, she suggested. Let me think about it. But you've already been thinking for months, she said. Each time I ask, you just say to think about it. Do you want my quick answer? I said. Her lips pressed tight as she noticed my expression and tone. Do you think you'll say yes? Not to taking me back, but just to give me a chance. A chance to show how much I care and how much I'm willing to do to make things right. I don't know, Kristen. I sighed. I honestly don't know. In early November, I got a call from Natalie. 2 weeks from tomorrow, she said. What's in 2 weeks, I asked. The party for your first great American novel. It's a mystery thriller, I corrected. Don't be modest, she said, coughing at the end. It's brilliant. 4 famous authors agree with us on that. Really? I said, surprised that my plan had worked. Who read it? James Patterson, Tammy Hogue, Dennis Lehane, and get ready, Stephen King. Stephen King? Yes, she said, nodding like she couldn't believe it either. He doesn't usually say much, but he really liked your book and might even come to the party. Really? Then what do you need from me? A new suit, she said, and be at the party on the 16th looking like a real author. Okay, I said. Who else will be there from our group? Well, I'll be there, of course. And Susan, too. I thought you'd want her there. Of course, I said. What about Marissa? She sighed. Are you sure? She's the one who deserves credit, you know. She got you to look at it. Talking about her editing, the book was way better. Okay, she said slowly. I'll see what I can do. You don't sound too sure, I said. Don't get me wrong. A few people know her, but none have met her face to face. Well, she's coming, I insisted. If I have to drag her there, it will give her some exposure. Maybe help her meet some people. Natalie sighed. It's your party. I'll handle things myself, I said. You just make sure they let us in, okay? You're the boss, she said before hanging up. The next day around noon, a FedEx driver pulled into my driveway with a big, heavy box. Tyler Collins, he said. That's me. Sign here. I quickly signed and took the box inside. It was 20 copies of Long Gone, my first book. I stopped writing for the day and drove to Chicago to buy 3 new suits along with shirts, ties, and belts. It cost me a lot, but I wasn't going to look out of place in New York. I tried calling Maurice, but got no answer. I didn't leave a message. By 5:30, I was sitting outside her apartment building. I was almost frozen and ready to leave at 10:30 when I saw a familiar figure walking toward me. She was with someone, and they stopped at the stoop. Tyler Collins, she said. The tall, skinny guy with her had messy hair, tight jeans, and a lot of earrings. He looked like a struggling punk musician. He had a cheap bottle of wine in one hand and a cigarette in the other. I tried to call, saying I had been out. She said she needed a few minutes. She turned to the guy with her and told him to leave. Then she looked at me. He gave me a nasty look, but left when she told him to. She said, "Hope you have something to drink." He just took my evening away. I said, "Come on, let's go get a drink." She shook her head, turned, and walked back the way she had come. "There's a liquor store on the corner. You're buying," I said, chasing after her. 10 minutes later, she opened the door to her apartment, holding the wine. I had bought 2 bottles to make up for ruining her evening. "Sorry for interrupting," I said, taking off my coat and warming up by the heater. "You should be," she replied, facing away from me as she reached up to grab 2 jelly jars for the wine. "I haven't been late in months," I said. "I brought you a present," I added, reaching into my coat pocket. She turned, carrying the glasses and wine into her tidy living room. She glanced at my hand as she passed me, then set down the bottle and glasses. "Sit," she ordered, pouring the wine. I obeyed and held out the book to her. "I wrote something for you," I nodded. She opened it to the page for Marissa. I had written on the inside cover, "A million thank yous can never repay all you've done to help my dream come true. With sincere thanks and love, Tyler Collins." "Very nice," she said after reading it. "You didn't see it all," I replied, flipping to the dedication page and handing the book back to her with feeling. "This book is dedicated to the best sisters in the world, for Marissa Key and Susan Cara Pulver." "You're a sap," she said, closing the book and putting it on the coffee table. "Guilty," I said, but I meant it. She looked at me, sipping her wine, then finished it in one go. "Okay then, let's have a little party," she said, getting up to turn on the music. John Coltrane played a sad sax tune. "It's good," she said, sitting back down and filling her glass again. "It gets better," I said, taking a sip. "They are having the book launch party in a couple of weeks in Manhattan. The publishers and maybe some famous authors will be there, like Stephen King." "Stephen King?" she snorted. "He could use a better editor. His early work was great, but now it's just messy." "Still," I said, "you'd have a great chance to meet some important people." She narrowed her eyes and got my meaning. "I'm paying," I said. "It's the least I can do, not just for the book, but for all your help with it." She stared at me for a moment, then started to laugh. "I am serious," I said. "I know, but that makes it even funnier. Can you picture me with Stephen King? Maybe John Updike? Get real." "Tyler," I said, slamming my glass down, surprising her. "What are you afraid of? Are you worried you'll have to join society if you meet these people? This is good for you, and you laugh at me. You won't even let me try to repay you for what you've done." She stayed silent, giving me a fierce look as she drank her second glass of wine in one gulp. "That's a good idea," I said, picking up the wine bottle. "Get drunk. Avoid your big chance." She let me refill her glass, but she only took a sip before putting it down. Then she walked to the window, staring outside while John Coltrane's sax played softly. "Okay," I heard her say. "I'll go." I walked over to her, standing by the window and looking down at the dark street below. "You'll have fun and meet people. Be nice," I said. "I'll try," she said, "and you'll celebrate the publication of our book with me." "It's your book," she mumbled. I took her by the shoulders and turned her to face me. "It's our book. I couldn't have done it without you, and it wouldn't be good without your help." Her beautiful dark eyes met mine. Then her face moved closer, and we kissed. It was soft and gentle at first, then more urgent. I was surprised at how natural it felt, and I kissed her back, holding her close. We were both eager, feeling a desire I didn't know was there. It was wild and strong, like everything we both felt before. I fell back onto the couch with her, and we only stopped kissing when we needed to catch our breath. We just held each other, feeling close. After a while, she said, "Okay, I'll try to behave at your party." "Do you think we can do this again?" she asked. It was good, really good. I spent the night at Marissa's, cuddled up to her warm, soft body, and I slept well. I woke up early around 5:30 when I heard her getting out of bed and going to shower. I quietly walked to the bathroom. "Hey," she said when I opened the door, expecting someone else. "Sorry, just a minute," I replied, rushing to use the bathroom before the shower and sliding back the curtain. "Good morning," I said. "Morning," she answered. Her eyes were closed as she rinsed shampoo from her hair. Even though I had seen her naked just hours before, seeing her wet body still amazed me. "Relax," she teased. "Sorry," I replied, smiling. "Don't be," she said. I stepped into the shower with her. While I could tell you that we spent the next half hour being intimate, that would not be the truth. She got out just moments after I got in, and I quickly washed up, then joined her in the kitchen within 10 minutes. We were both dressed, with our hair still wet. We sat at the table, sipping hot coffee, not wanting to talk. After a few minutes, she finally spoke up. "So, about last night?" "What about it?" I asked. "Just don't think you'll get to do that again," she said, looking down at her cup. "It's been a while for me, too," I replied, meeting her eyes as she looked up. I noticed a flash of anger there, but I smiled. "That's not why it happened. At least for me," I added. "Really?" she said, her tone calm but distant. "I'm not saying I love you. Honestly, I don't even know if I really like you," I admitted. "Then what do you mean?" "I see something in you that really interests me. I want to get to know you better," she scoffed. "Looks like you already got to know me pretty well last night. Honestly, I kind of regret it." "Why?" I asked. "Not what you expected. Better, actually." "Then what's wrong with last night?" "Because now you'll think I'm just looking for more." "So you're worried I'll think that just because I want to know you better?" "I don't date," she said softly, but there was something else in her voice. Maybe regret or insistence, I wasn't sure. "Then we won't date," I suggested. "Just friends." "Friends with benefits?" she challenged. "No, just friends. I have enough friends already." "Are you really so popular that you can't fit me into your life?" she asked, sipping her coffee while looking at me. "You don't even know me," she said. "That's the point. I want to get to know you." "We're nothing alike," she responded, getting up to refill her coffee. "Really?" I said. "Because I wear jeans and nice shirts and you dress like—" I paused, trying to find the right words. "Like what?" she asked, raising her eyebrow at me. "Like you do," I finished. She shook her head. "It's more than that, and you know it." "Really? Just because of how we dress?" It's not just that. You know it too, she replied. Look at how you fit in and how I don't. When we went out for lunch, people looked past you and stared at me. They think I'm weird. Then why do you dress like that? I asked. You know how they look at you. Because it's none of their business, Marissa said, raising her voice. I want them to see me for me, not my clothes. And here I am trying to do just that, and you won't let me, I pointed out. It's complicated, she said. Try me, I insisted. If you call Susan, she'll tell you everything, she said, her tone pleading. Not going to happen, I told her. You have no right to dig into my life, she said, glaring at me. I know, I shrugged. You can call me selfish, but I really want to understand you. You don't know what it's like for me, she said. You were popular and handsome. I was different, the tall weirdo with no friends. So, you chose to... I began. I decided to be my own person, she replied. Their way got me nowhere. Now I'm doing things my way. Oh, really? I said, not holding back. Bringing home random people just to get by? Not wanting real relationships? That's great. Stop judging my choices. She slammed her cup down, spilling coffee. And screw you too! Marissa's anger exploded, and I struggled to hide my surprise. I didn't back down under her fire. I like you just as you are, I said, reaching towards her. You don't have to change at all. Yeah, right. Just wait until you take me to one of your parties, and everyone looks down at me and thinks you are crazy for being with me. I don't care about them, I assured her. You say that now, but you will care. You will care about what they think, and what your family thinks too. Her voice turned desperate. Then try me. What do you have to lose? The worst that will happen is we spend some time together and then it ends, and you end up back where you started. But I don't want to go through this again, she said. How many times do I have to be hurt before I can stop trying to please everybody? How much pain should I take? How long until I stop feeling like a loser? I promise I will never treat you like that, I said firmly. No matter what happens, I will never treat you badly. Everyone says that at first. They all make promises, but then they break them. So what's the other choice? Live life with just one-night stands? And grow old alone? No friends to talk to or someone to care about for the next 50 years? She replied quickly. There's a better choice out there. I leaned back, took a sip of my coffee, and looked at her. Marissa seemed very anxious, hoping I would just drop the topic. But I could see something special in her. A kindness. Loyalty, even. She had read my book, which was written by someone unknown. Yet she saw something in it for me, a complete stranger. She spent weeks of her life helping me. She could say it was just to get the book published or for her job. But if that was the case, she wouldn't have worked so hard. No, she cared about people and wanted to be accepted. She wanted that acceptance on her own terms. I want to take you to dinner, I said. You choose the place where you feel comfortable. Dress however you want. I don't mind. I just want to take you to dinner. Her shoulders dropped when she realized I wasn't going to back down. She put her head down on the table as if giving up. Okay, she finally whispered. I got up, walked around the table, and knelt beside her. I held her chin gently and turned her face to mine, looking into her beautiful dark eyes. We can go as far as you want, I told her. If you just want to be friends, that's fine. If you want to see if there's something more, that's fine too. It's your choice. She nodded softly while I held her chin. I promise you, I said sincerely. I've known you long enough to know what I'm getting into. I promise I won't toss you aside. Her lips tightened, and her eyes blinked a few times like she was trying not to cry. Then she wrapped her arms around my neck and hugged me tightly. Okay, she said. Just remember, you promised. You seem different, Kristen said. We were sitting on the back porch watching Dad push Ben on the swing. I had come home a little earlier, helped Mom with her exercises, and now we were enjoying the last of the nice weather before winter. How so? I asked. Like you found someone? She looked away as she spoke. Someone you're excited about. I was quiet, unsure how to answer. Did you sleep with her? She asked boldly. What difference does that make? I replied, surprised at her question. I've slept with at least a dozen women since you left. What's one more? Because you care about this one, she said, looking down at her lap. Other than Allie, I'm not sure how much you really cared for her. You haven't fallen for anyone since you left me. I nodded. You can say it. I haven't really fallen for anyone since you left me. Since I left you, she whispered. You're wrong, I told her. I fell for someone just before I came back here, someone special. It was more than just physical, I can assure you that. If it weren't for what happened with Mom, maybe I would be with her now. Kristen was quiet, seemingly shocked that I had feelings for someone else even after she left me. She seemed to be holding on to this idea that she was my only love, the only person I could be with. What's the big deal? I asked, feeling upset. We sat in silence, looking at Ben. Listen, I said, trying to cheer her up. I don't really know how serious this is going to be. What do you mean? She asked. I mean, she's scared to get too close, I explained. Why? Kristen asked. Because she's been hurt before. Kristen thought for a moment and then put her hand over mine. But you want her to say yes, right? I think so, I replied. I want her to at least give it a try. Do I know her? I chuckled. Yeah, you've seen her. She's my editor. The girl I had dinner with that night. The one who told me about Ben. Kristen's eyes widened. But she sounds amazing. I smiled. Yes, she is. She's smart, kind, and pretty. All good qualities. It may be a bit hard to get to know her, but she's great. Kristen stayed quiet, letting my words hang in the air. So you might be in love with her? She asked. You want to find out? I looked at her, unsure. We'll see how it plays out, but if she has her way, it might not go anywhere. Kristen nodded but tried to smile. She seemed frightened, finally understanding that there might never again be a Tyler and Kristen. Our time had passed, and she was realizing that I could find love with someone else, like Marissa. Then, Kristen squeezed my hand. No matter what, she said, her voice strong, I want you to be happy. I mean it. If you can't be happy with me anymore, I want you to find someone and be happy with them. You deserve it. I nodded, meaning what I said. You too. She smiled a lopsided grin and kissed me on the cheek. Thanks. I decided to give Marissa 5 days, then I would call her to plan a dinner date on day 3. She called me first. Are you really serious about wanting to get to know me? She asked, her voice a bit shaky. I've never been more serious about anything in my life, I replied. And about me picking where we go? A deal's a deal, I promised. I could hear her take a deep breath, then she spoke quickly. Tomorrow night, pick me up at 5:30. Greek Islands in Greektown. I'll see you then. I made sure to tell her, I'll be there. When I picked her up, she was dressed in all black, just like always. Her face looked at me with a challenge, wanting me to say something. You look great, I said with a smile, as I moved her hand away from the door and opened it for her. You don't have to do that, she replied. What, open my door? This isn't the 1950s, I can do it myself. I smiled and closed the door after her. Then I got in the car and drove onto Halstead. I'm not asking you to change, I said, paying attention to the street signs. Don't bother asking me, okay? We're doing this to see if we can get along. Let's just be ourselves instead of trying to change each other, she said quietly. Okay, I said. Fair enough. I added, you really do look great. That's just because you know what's underneath. True, I agreed, grinning. What? She asked. The tattoo, I said, glancing at her as I turned left onto Halstead. What about it? It's really cool. A faint smile appeared on her lips. You really like it? I love it, I said, seeing that made her happy. After a minute, her hand moved to rest on my leg. We drove the rest of the way in silence, enjoying the quiet. Almost an hour and a half later, Marissa pushed her half-finished plate of baklava away. I give up, she said, patting her stomach. You're kidding, right? What, do you think I'm a pig? I smiled. That's the first time in about 15 times we've gone out that you've left any food on your plate. Just then, a waiter rushed to our table. He was a Greek guy in his mid-40s with slicked-back black hair and a bit of stubble. He looked at the plate, then at Marissa, then back to the plate. A big smile spread across his face. What? Marissa asked. You too, he laughed. I had a bet with the cooks. $50. No way you could eat it, I told them. They beat me, you could. Then you win, she said, smiling. $50, he said, tapping his head. I knew you could do it. They laughed and said it didn't matter, she replied, pushing her chair away from the table. Now everyone thinks I'm a pig, she said. Not a pig, he said, placing a hand on her shoulder. You're active, with a good appetite, but definitely not a pig. He looked at her in a way that showed he wouldn't mind sharing a meal with her. I think we're ready for the check, I said, cutting off the gaze. He quickly got the check and handed it to me. I slid a $100 bill under the check. His eyes lit up at the tip. We're square, I confirmed. Thank you, he said, taking the check and bill before hurrying away. Thanks, Marissa said, putting her hand on mine. My pleasure. So what now? I asked, patting my stomach. I don't know about you, but I could use a walk, she said, groaning as she rubbed her full belly. Come on, it'll do you good. So that's what we did for the next hour. We walked across the bridge and into the city center, talking about our favorite buildings and the people rushing home from work. We guessed which ones were lawyers, brokers, traders, and so on. An hour and a half after dinner, we parked half a block from her apartment. You coming in? She asked. I shook my head. I'm serious. No more of that until we both know where this is going. But I want you to come in, she said, taking my hand and squeezing it. Really? And you'll be good? If that's what you want, she answered, raising an eyebrow. It's not what I want, I replied. I think it's best, I said. Whatever, she said, opening the door. So, are you coming in? I turned off the engine and followed her inside her apartment. It looked spotless, just like last time I was there. I thought she might be a little bit of a neat freak. We sat on the couch, listened to jazz, sipped wine, and talked about books. We shared our opinions about what was good, what was bad, and why. Then we talked about our childhoods, families, and friends, covering everything under the sun. As we talked, it felt easier to connect, and I could see her starting to relax. I could get used to this, I said, finishing my wine. What? I meant the jazz, I said, and you. She smiled and reached for the bottle to pour more wine for me. No, I said, pulling my cup back. I've been here almost 2 hours and I have a long drive ahead of me. Spend the night, she said, not pushing or demanding. Where will I sleep? I asked. In the bed, of course. Oh, I said, leaning back and looking at her. And you'll behave? A smile played on her lips, lighting up her face. I'll try. Me too, I replied. You think you'll succeed? It depends on how much more of this we drink. Then let's have just one more and then turn in, I suggested. I wouldn't want you to do anything you might regret. She leaned in closer. Are you sure about that? It sounds kind of risky, I replied. Maybe it was her playful attitude that made me lean in and kiss her. Just a soft peck. And then she kissed me back, wanting more. Before I knew it, we were really kissing on the couch. After what felt like a wonderful eternity, I pulled away, taking a deep breath. Okay, I said. Time for that bed now. She pouted, but her expression showed something more. Something like she was glad I had taken it slow. I wasn't glad, though. I was still fully dressed. A couple of times during the night, I reached out for her while she slept, but I stopped myself each time. I felt a mix of frustration and nervousness. The next morning, as I put on my jacket to leave for Grant City, I was grateful for my self-control. Marissa turned to me and asked, So when's our next date? When do you want? I replied. Tonight or tomorrow? She smiled. It might be hard with your studying and my book. What about Friday? I shrugged. What do you want to do? Marissa seemed to think for a moment, biting her lip and staring at the ceiling. Finally, she looked at me with a mix of excitement and worry. I want to meet your friends. My friends? I asked, surprised. The ones from school? The ones I went out with last Friday? Yeah, you said you meet most Fridays. I thought for a moment. Allie and Kristen might be there. It was at Chumley's place, and they were close to his wife, Darla. Is there a reason you're hesitating? Marissa asked, now looking more confident. I sighed, realizing what she was doing. You think I'm embarrassed of you? I finally understood her fear. She was worried about our relationship and afraid I might leave her like others had. I smiled widely. So you're coming back to Grant City? Only if we go to the party, she said, grinning. When's your last class? On Friday. Don't dodge my question, she said firmly. I'll skip class if I have to. Well, I was hoping you could come early, I said. I'd love for you to check out my new book, the sequel. Marissa looked at me, unsure if I was avoiding her question. If you think I'll back down because of your book, you're wrong. Oh no, I interrupted. The party starts at 7 and I wanted to make sure you had time to look it over. That way you can see if anything major needs fixing before I finish it. She narrowed her eyes, searching for a trick in my words. If that helps, I can email you my work in progress. Then you'll have time to read it before we talk about it. That way we can get to the party on time. So you'll come? Of course. Why wouldn't I? You need to meet them eventually, right? I guess so, she said, sounding a bit uncertain. Great. I'll email you the file, and if you have time, look it over. Just call or email me when you're in town, so I'll be ready for you. She nodded, lost in thought. Can I have a kiss before I leave? She walked over and gave me a quick peck on the cheek. I'll see you Friday. As I left, she stood in the doorway, watching me without really seeing me. I felt a shiver run through me. What would Kristen and Allie think? Marissa dressed in her usual black clothing and makeup, with a long black coat for the cold. My mom, who had never met her, was surprised by her look at first. But after Marissa talked to her for a bit, asking about her health, everything settled down. My dad, who was used to Marissa's style by now, just smiled and listened, chiming in with a comment here and there. I sat next to Marissa and watched them. Soon we headed upstairs for about an hour and a half. Marissa pointed out some big plot issues, character mistakes, and things that didn't flow well in my book. Don't get me wrong, she said halfway through. It's really good. Better than the first one, for sure. You would have found most of this when you edited it, but I've saved you some time. Right, I said, knowing she caught things I wouldn't have noticed. By 7:15, we pulled into Chumley and Darla's driveway. Their home was packed with cars, and I saw Kristen's right in front of us. Marissa must have seen my hesitation or the way my knuckles tightened on the steering wheel. Problem? She asked, her tone teasing. I turned to her and said, That's my ex-wife's car. You knew she'd be here? Marissa's eyes widened. I nodded. She's close with Darla. I didn't think you'd believe me if I said anything. Maybe this isn't a good idea, Marissa said, looking nervous. You're not backing out now, I said firmly. We could go back to my place, watch a movie or something, she offered. Nope, I said, getting out and walking around to open her door. Marissa, always quick to open her own door, stayed still. Come on, I said, holding out my hand to her. She didn't move, so I leaned down and took her hand, gently pulling her out of the car. Will you relax? I said. It'll be fine. When Darla opened the front door, her smile turned to confusion when she saw Marissa. Hello, sweetie, I said, leaning in to give Darla a quick kiss on her cheek. This is Marissa. Hey, Tyler, Darla replied, looking surprised. Marissa tried to smile and nodded, but she seemed just as frozen as Darla. Where should we put this? I asked, holding out a platter of sausage, cheese, and crackers on top of a pack of beer. Darla snapped back to reality and smiled brightly. Come on, handsome, she said, leading me through the crowd in the living room and into the kitchen. As we walked, I noticed two things. Marissa's footsteps just behind me and the curious looks from my classmates and their dates watching us. I managed to smile and nod at everyone on my way to the table full of snacks. Beer or wine? I asked Marissa once I set the platter down next to a plate of veggies and a pot of meatballs with the beer staying cold outside. Marissa turned towards me, her eyes wide and unsure. I said beer or wine, I repeated. She shook her head. How about a beer? Allie said, appearing behind me and holding out a bottle to us. Hey, Marissa. Marissa took the beer, nodding at Allie with a quiet, thanks. Haven't seen you in months, Allie exclaimed. Marissa tried to relax. I didn't see this coming, Allie said, looking surprised. I was more worried about Allie's reaction than Kristen's, but Marissa stayed silent. Does this mean Tyler is almost done with another book? Allie asked. Almost, I replied. Good, she said, grabbing Marissa's arm. I'll introduce her around, okay? Sure, Allie, I said, watching them go. Come on, hun, Allie urged, pulling Marissa toward a group of women, including Kristen, who were chatting in the corner. She's cute, Danny said, stepping up behind me with his beer. Kind of different looking, Chumley chimed in. Yeah, I'd go for her. You'd go for anything, I joked. So she's a vampire or something? Chumley asked, looking at Marissa like she was strange. No, she's goth, I explained. Kristen was watching Marissa closely, and the other women looked unsure, but Allie was in charge, encouraging everyone to talk. Does she have any weird piercings? Chumley asked. Most girls online do. Danny agreed, but seemed uncomfortable with the idea. I turned to them, but their eyes were still on Marissa. Come on, guys. Chill out, I said. You didn't answer me, Chumley pressed. Does she have piercings? He asked with a weird grin. How should I know? I replied, smiling. They didn't believe me, though. Tyler, you sure are keeping things interesting, Alan said as he joined us, pushing his long hair back. What do you mean? I asked. First, you date the hottest girl in our class. Then you convince her to marry you and move to Florida. Now you're back. You got something special or what? He whispered. I just laughed. Across the room, Marissa laughed too. It looked like she was enjoying herself. The ladies were now chatting and laughing effortlessly, and I saw Marissa relax more and more. I couldn't have planned it better if I tried. On the drive home, I asked Marissa, "What were you all laughing about?" She seemed happy and giggled as she answered, "Oh, just talking about things." "What kinds of things?" I asked. "You know, Tyler." "No, I don't. That's why I'm asking." She looked at me and burst into laughter. "Was Kristen saying something embarrassing?" "What makes you think it was Kristen?" She teased back. I listed off names. Okay, I get it. Don't be mad, sweetie," she said, gently brushing my cheek. "It was fun. They're nice." I smiled, unsure whether to be upset with my friends or grateful that they accepted Marissa. Then she said, "Now I know some of your interests." She laughed, holding back her giggles. "You know, like maybe trying some new things?" "Seriously?" I groaned. "It's not like that." "Not according to Allie," she teased. "It was just once. And it was great." I asked, "Anything else?" "Oh yeah, there's more," she smiled. I sighed, thinking about Kristen and Allie. "Hey, Tyler," she said, her hand gently moving over my leg. "I think we could know each other better now. Maybe we could go to a hotel and try some things." Then she laughed again, giving me an accidental squeeze. I said I would get back at all those gossiping women who share secrets. She just laughed more. I couldn't wait to call Susan the next day. At a stoplight, I turned to her. "Enjoy your laugh," I said. "You might find out about my thing for spanking, whether giving or getting." She laughed. It seemed like they didn't learn much about your past. I couldn't help it. Her laughter was catchy, and soon I was laughing too. It was more of a chuckle, but still, she took my breath away. She was so carefree, so happy. I felt good, glad to be a part of her joy, even if it was just as the punchline. That's when I realized I loved this girl. Me, about to be a maybe, if the experts are right. But what do they know? A successful writer in love with this odd, funny, quiet, smart girl who eats a lot. This amazing young woman with a bright smile and a laugh that spreads joy. We didn't have much in common except for writing and good books. Nothing else. Does love really work this way? It sure wasn't anything I had ever dreamed of. Would she ever love me back? That thought scared me, because I knew more than ever that I wanted her to love me, or at least like me, even if it included some passion. I needed Marissa to care for me. Then I got a call from Marissa 3 days later. "There's a problem," she said. "What problem?" I asked. "The party is next Saturday," she said. "Yeah, I know. We're flying out Friday morning. We'll spend Friday and Saturday in Manhattan, then go to the party and fly back Sunday afternoon. What's the problem?" "I can't make it," she replied. "What? Why not?" I pressed her, but she stayed silent. "Come on, Marissa, what's up?" "Something came up," she said quietly. "Like what?" "Just something I can't change." I took a deep breath. Since we parted last Saturday, I'd been excited about our mini vacation. "Can I at least see you before I go?" I asked. "Sorry," she whispered. "Marissa, what's wrong? Did I do something?" "It's not you, it's just something. Can we talk about it?" She stayed quiet. "Marissa?" "I'm sorry, Tyler," she said, and then hung up. I tried to call her back, but it went to voicemail. I left one message, then sent another an hour later. By late Wednesday morning, I had sent her 6 messages with no reply. I was worried. "Why don't you just go see her?" Dad said. "You've been walking around all sad. Go find out what's wrong." I looked at him, then at Mom, who nodded. so I took their advice. I sat outside Marissa's apartment for 3 hours before a neighbor came home and saw me there. "She's not here," the woman said. "She left early yesterday with a suitcase." "Did she say where she was going?" I asked. "Sorry, I don't know," she answered. I got back on the highway, calling Susan. "Hello, Susan, it's Tyler." There was a pause before she replied. "Hi, Tyler, how are you? Have you heard from Marissa? She canceled the trip and won't take my calls. I went to her apartment and she's not there." "Tyler, I'm sorry. Marissa's with me." "What's wrong? Did I do something?" "It's not you, it's just something. Can I talk to her? Just to say hello?" "Not right now. She doesn't want to talk to you. I wouldn't push it." "Can you tell me anything?" "Not now, Tyler. I'm really sorry." "I knew you cared about her. I'll tell her that. Please, just let me talk to her." "Goodbye, Tyler. I'll call you when I can tell you more." Then I got pulled over for speeding. The cop was older, and it was clear he understood my troubled look. "Woman problems?" he asked. I just nodded. "Look, going fast isn't going to help. Slow down," he said. He walked back to his car while a thought hit me, and I hoped Kristen would be home when I got back. "What did you talk about with Marissa?" I asked once we were in my room. Kristen smiled. Then her face fell when she saw mine. "It's not funny," I said, trying to hold back my anger. "She's gone and won't talk to me." "You're serious?" she said, her face full of worry. "She left. So what did you talk about to make her do this?" "Just some funny stories from when we grew up," she said, looking down. "What kind of stories?" I pressed. "Just some silly stuff when we were kids, like when we first tried smoking or painted in a workshop." I nodded, but I had a feeling there was more. "I won't lie to you, Tyler. We were nice to her." "I saw how you two interacted," I said. "I wouldn't do that to you," she said urgently. "Then what happened? Please, just trust me. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." I looked at her, still unsure if I could believe her. "I want you to give us another chance. But do you really think I'm going to ruin every relationship you have just for that?" "Why wouldn't you?" she asked. "Because then you'll never give me another chance. I know you. You'd hate me even more." "I don't hate you," I said. "But you don't love me," she replied. "Not enough to try again. We've talked about this." "I know," she interrupted. "But let me tell you what I know. If you really care about her and I do something to get in the way, you will never speak to me again. Not like you do now." She was right, of course. "You think I want to mess up what we have with Ben and hurt him? You really think I'd risk that? So yes, I want you back. But I messed up. I know that. I only want you to be happy," she continued. "And I promise I'll try harder than ever." "Well then, I want that chance. But if I hurt things between you two, you'll blame me forever. I don't want that. I don't want Ben to see his parents dislike each other, even a little." I nodded. She was right. It wasn't anything she or the other women said or did that night. But what was it then? "I can tell you something," Kristen said. "What?" "There was something in the way she looked at you when we talked. It was like she cared about you, almost like a puppy's love. But there was more to it, like she was scared." I needed to stop lying to myself. I had suspected it after talking to Susan, and now Kristen confirmed it. Marissa didn't trust me. She had been hurt before, badly. She was so scared to let herself care again. What do I do now? I was packing on Thursday night, getting ready for an early flight to Manhattan. I was lost in my thoughts when I heard a noise. When I stepped out to see, I found Mom on the stairs trying to pull herself up. "Mom," I said, rushing down to help. "What are you doing? Where's Dad?" "We need to talk," she said. Her voice was clearer now. "I'll help you downstairs," I said, holding on to her. "No," she said firmly. She wanted to climb the rest of the way, so I helped her until we reached my room. She sat down in the chair by my desk and looked at me. "You're hurting," she said. I nodded. "Is it Kristen?" "No, Mom, it's not just her." "So you've decided not to go back to her?" "Pretty much, yeah, it's over." At first, Mom looked upset, but then she seemed determined. "Why?" "Because she left me," I explained, struggling to find the right words. "She just left without a word. Then she married someone else." "But you love her," she said. I thought before I answered. "Yes, I love her. I always have. But my love wasn't enough." Have you seen other marriages survive worse? Yes, but I've also seen how long they survive. Were they happy? Really happy? They weren't, Mom said, shaking her head. I've thought about this a lot. First, she hurt me by leaving. There was no explanation. Just a new marriage with someone she was with while we were together. That's huge. And you can't forgive that? I shook my head. It's complicated. I loved her so much. It's hard to accept that she could do this to me. That just makes it harder, Mom said, her face kind and understanding. You think she cares now? That she wants to prove her love? I can't trust it. What if we get back together and she gets bored again? If she really loved me, she wouldn't have left. Did you make mistakes? Sure, I did. But she is the one who left. And now? Now I think she wants to try again because of everything going on with her life. But I can't just think about myself. I have to think about Ben. He's growing up without his mom and dad together. It's all he knows right now. You think it's better for him to grow up in a single-parent home than a broken one? That's not what I mean, I said. I think a regular family wouldn't work out. I want to protect Ben from that. Kristen and I are getting along now, and I don't want him to face a divorce and all the trouble that comes with it. We sat quiet for a moment. Then she asked, Is it Marissa? Yeah, Mom, it's Marissa. Do you really care for her? She said. You seem protective and you always lean toward her. I think I love her, I replied. Mom nodded, her serious face turning into a smile, although just one side of her mouth smiled. She felt like the mom I had known my whole life. The stroke she had suffered didn't seem to matter at that moment. She was my mom again. I can see how you might not notice her at first, but in those few minutes I was with her, I saw something nice. That's pretty rare. I nodded, not sure how to say what I felt. Have you told her? Did you tell her you love her? Mom asked. No, I never really had the chance. That's nonsense, Tyler, Mom said, surprising me. She rarely swore. You've had many chances. She's gone now. I started to explain. Then go find her. Tell her. Mom said Marissa was with her sister in Florida, but she won't want to see me. Then find a way to get the message to her through her sister or something. But how? I asked. Mom got up from her chair, using her cane for support as she moved closer to me. If you really love her, you'll think of something. She walked to me by the bed. Now kiss your mom for helping you, and help me down the stairs before I fall. That night around 8 o'clock, I was at my desk, working on my almost finished second book. For some reason, I figured out a way to get a message to Marissa. I thought that Susan should be the one to tell her how I felt. Tyler's sleeping, Susan said when I answered the phone. Do you know what time I have to wake up in the morning? Tell her I love her, Susan. Don't say I care for her. Tell her I love her. Susan paused. Tell her I insisted, and also tell her if she's not at the party on Saturday night, I'm leaving. This isn't just my book. This is ours. Yours, Marissa's, and mine. I want all of us to be there to get the credit. But Tyler, Susan started, wide awake now. No buts. I'm not going to have the biggest night of my life without the woman I love by my side. I don't care how you do it, but Marissa has to be there. Even if just to tell me to get out of her life. But she must be there, or I won't be. But you can't do that, Susan said. You have a contract. I know what the contract says, but I don't care. They can sue me. What if I can't find a way? Susan seemed worried. I'm serious. She has to be in Manhattan by Saturday morning, and she has to be at that party. But it sounds like blackmail. No, Susan, I said quietly. This is the only way I can tell the woman I love how I feel. I mean every single word. Susan sighed. I'll see what I can do. Thanks, I said, but she hung up without saying goodbye. The flight was smooth, and the meetings with publishers, editors, lawyers, and graphic designers were boring. Friday night dinner was good, though things got brighter when Natalie left to take a call. 5 minutes later, she returned with a big smile. She'll be here, she said. Marissa? Of course. Who else? I asked eagerly. When? Tomorrow morning. The flight lands at 10. What gate? I was ready to go. No way, Buster. You have more meetings in the morning and you need to rest in the afternoon. I glared at her. You're not telling the truth. What good would that do? She replied. I'm lying. You would just leave. She squeezed my hand. Just relax, okay? Try to enjoy yourself. Pay more attention at the meetings. Get a nap before the party. You'll see her then. I repeated. You're not lying. I needed to convince myself. Ahem, said a short, gray-haired man at our table. Yes, Riley, Natalie replied. The publisher asked, This Marissa you're speaking of, is she the young lady who helped edit this book? That's her, I said, and she's going to be here. Riley looked surprised and pleased. She better be here, I said. What do you mean, Tyler? If she's not, I started. What he means, Natalie interrupted, squeezing my arm tightly, is that he thinks she deserves most of the credit. I'm not sure, Riley said, smiling at me. She didn't write it. You did. So she deserves credit. But maybe not most. If it weren't for her, you wouldn't have seen it at all. And you've seen my draft before. She helped me make it better. Riley nodded. I have to agree, it's even better than we thought. Your final version was great, but hers is better, right? He nodded again. So she deserves most of the credit. I smiled, imagining how he would feel when he met her. I thought back to when I first saw her and how I fell in love with her. The party started at 8 on Saturday night, and I was there 5 minutes early. It took place in a fancy ballroom at the Waldorf Astoria, where my picture was hung on large signs. The room was scattered with copies of my new book. There were also many extra copies for the press, critics, and the famous people who were expected to come. I had spent an hour and a half signing every book. A few dozen people were already there, mostly standing around the bar or sitting at tables filled with small snacks. I didn't know any of them, and I couldn't see Marissa anywhere. Just then, I felt a light squeeze on my arm. It was Susan. I leaned over and gave her a quick kiss on the cheek. Congratulations, Tyler, she said, looking around the room and then back at me. You should be really proud. Thanks, I replied, noticing she was with a guy who looked about my age. He had a square jaw and short, light brown hair. No, Marissa. Where is she? I'd like you to meet Todd Muller, she said. We're dating. Todd smiled and reached out his hand to me. You can say it, babe. Really? We're dating, Susan said, smiling at him. Tyler Collins, I said, shaking his hand firmly. Thanks for coming, and congratulations to Susan. She's a very special person. He looked at her with pride, and she returned his smile warmly. I know, he said. We met during a trial a few years back. She impressed me, he said with a grin. Then I saw her again in a small grocery store, a little place tucked away in an alley. She patted his arm. You don't have to tell him everything. I just did, he laughed. Except we had a drink, and one thing led to another. And here we are, Susan said, giving him a quick kiss on the cheek. I'm happy for you, I said. You deserve it. She smiled back at me. You were the one who encouraged me to give it a try. I nodded but kept glancing around the room, still hoping to see Marissa. She'll be here soon, Susan said. You know how it is, makeup and traffic and all that. I searched her face for signs that she wasn't telling the truth, but she looked sincere. Tyler, I heard someone call. Come over here a moment. I walked toward the entrance and saw Riley McMasters next to two men I recognized from pictures and movies. Tyler, he said, I'd like to introduce you to Clint Eastwood and Stephen King. It's an honor, I said, shaking their hands, feeling amazed. Thanks, Eastwood replied in his familiar voice. Good to meet you, Tyler, King said as I shook his hand. An excellent book. Well done. Really? I said, surprised. That's high praise from you two. Eastwood chuckled. You don't know why I'm here, do you? For the party? I guessed. Someone's supposed to be here and you want to see? King said. He has no clue, Eastwood laughed. I'm a leading partner at Trick Warner. They both chuckled, shaking their heads in disbelief. Trick Warner bought the movie option, Natalie said, walking up behind me. Hello, Clint. Stephen. They both hugged her and kissed her cheek. Natalie, you old friend, King said. Still finding all the new talent, aren't you? When are you coming to my agency? They all laughed and joked with each other, but my mind was elsewhere. By 9:30, my nerves were shot. Susan kept telling me to be patient, but my patience was wearing thin. I had talked to almost every one of the 200 people in the banquet room by then. I was back with Eastwood and King, now joined by Carl Hyacin, a great mystery writer from Florida who was one of my favorites. So you're saying this girl, Marissa, Hyacinth said, disbelief on his face. She read it and got Natalie to contact you and edited it? I nodded. Really? King asked. And she's a student working on her doctorate in English creative writing, too. Listen to her, Hyacinth added. I nodded again. She's really good at editing. How did she help? King asked. Was it just spelling or what? No, it was a lot more than that. Does she write? Eastwood asked. I mean, for herself? Some, I think, I answered. She wants to, but she says she's waiting for more life experience. How is she with dialogue? Eastwood asked. Did you read her work? I nodded. The three of us were all impressed. She helped me change a lot of it, not just a word here and there, but really improved it. Hyacinth whistled. King nodded thoughtfully while Eastwood seemed to be deep in thought. Wow, Hyacinth said softly. What? I asked, suddenly noticing Eastwood's narrowed eyes and King looking amazed. Oh, man, Eastwood said. I wish I were 30 years younger. Me too, King agreed. Just then, I spotted a tall woman in a simple sleeveless green dress walking into the room. Her short hair was parted to one side, almost covering her left eye. She held a small green purse close to her. Marissa, I whispered, surprised by how she looked. You know her? King asked. That's her? Hyacinth asked, looking at the editor. You need to work with that, Eastwood said, speaking with respect. Excuse me, I said, walking toward her without looking back. She noticed me when I was still a good distance away. Her body tensed, and she looked embarrassed. She looked down, then back up to meet my gaze. You came? I asked, relieved. She nodded. You too? I didn't recognize you when you walked in. I had to look again, I said. You look great. Yeah? She asked. Yeah, I said, taking her hand. You look great. Maybe even a little better than great. Really? She said. Because I feel like a Barbie doll. I leaned in and whispered, Barbie dolls never excited me before. She smiled, or at least she tried to, but she was very nervous. Her eyes kept darting around, and she kept looking at the floor. Can we get some fresh air? I asked. She nodded and took my hand, following me to the balcony. Here, I said, putting my suit coat over her shoulders to block the breeze. Did you mean it? She asked, searching my face. What you told Susan to tell me? Did you mean it? That you love me? I said yes. She nodded. You're right. I meant it more than anything. I've never been more serious in my whole life. She didn't smile. Instead, her eyes seemed to look right into mine, searching for any hint of a lie. I sighed. I'll tell you when I knew it. It was the second night we spent together. Well, not really then, but the next day when I was driving home. The second night was special. I knew I'd miss you for a couple of days, but I didn't want to wait even a minute. But I called you first, she said. I was afraid to push you. You seemed reluctant. Not sure, I said. But this isn't just infatuation. I shook my head. It's like what I felt with Kristen, but stronger, way stronger. I loved her, but I could think about other things when I wasn't with her. With you, though, I can't focus on anything else. The book I've been working on? It hasn't gone anywhere since that second night. Then say it, she insisted. Say it again. Convince me. I love you, Marissa, I said, stepping closer, holding her face in my hands, looking into her deep brown eyes. I promise you, this isn't just a crush. I know what that feels like. This is different. She pressed her lips tightly together. Don't just tell yourself it's true, I urged. Believe it. It's a fact. And I will spend my life proving I love you. Tears began to fill her eyes again, but she said nothing. I love Ben too, I continued. But it's not more or less than what I feel for you. It's different, like a father loves a son. I love my parents too, but you... I trailed off, seeing her nod, encouraging me to go on. I love you like those love stories we laugh at, only it's stronger, more real. I want Ben to be on his own after college. As for my parents, I'm looking for a new place now that my mom is better. I kissed her, a gentle touch on her tear-streaked lips. I tasted salt and mint. And me? She whispered. I don't want you to move out, not unless I'm with you. I could be with you forever and never get tired of it. Are you sure? Yes, I said firmly. And in 5 years, will you still feel the same? If we work together, it'll be even stronger. Is that a proposal? A voice said from behind us. Riley? Marissa gasped. You're ruining it! You men! She ignored them, hugging me tight, her face against my shoulder. I love you too, more than anything, but I'm scared, she admitted. Is that an acceptance? Riley asked. Shush, Natalie said. What's wrong with you? If I get you a ring, will you say yes? I whispered to her. Will that show you I mean it? But she pulled away, sniffling. I ran away, she said. I know, I replied. But you didn't leave me. You were scared. You won't do it again, will you? I felt her head shake against my shoulder. And you truly love me, right? Yes. So now you know I really love you, right? I know, she said. So let me say it again. Should I get a nice ring and kneel down, or do you want to elope and get married? Am I rushing things? I asked. You know, she said, pulling back to look at me. Tears glistened in her eyes, but a joyful smile was on her lips. You little rascal, I teased. I think that was an acceptance, Natalie said later, tangled up in bed. Marissa spoke up. Can you believe it? Clint Eastwood wants me to help him write a script. Help him write a script, I corrected her, and only if they actually make a movie. But still, she said, Clint Eastwood and Stephen King want you too. I don't know if I want to do that, she said. Why not? I asked. What can I do? Come on, Tyler. He's Stephen King. You'll break his heart if you refuse. I don't know, she replied thoughtfully. What if they wouldn't have even noticed me if I hadn't... Wait, I said, confused. What do you mean? If I had shown up as Marissa, the young, angry woman in blue you talked about, I don't think anything would have changed. I said that's the Marissa I fell for, the one I still love. Really? That's the Marissa who got my attention. I know it would catch theirs, too. Then there's this new Marissa. She shivered as I touched her tattoo. You love her, too. Is she the real Marissa? I asked. Maybe. I rolled onto my side, rested my head on my hand, and looked at her. Why? Why did you do this? You look amazing. But I will love you no matter how you dress or what makeup you wear, she said. I didn't want to embarrass you. I looked at her closely. I was never embarrassed. Not once. She smiled. I know, and that's why I love you and why I believe you love me too. But tonight is yours. I wanted it to be about you, not about that crazy editor you used to love. I smiled. Well, the new look is nice. Oh, that too. But now I was thinking about how cool it is that Clint Eastwood likes my girl. Think about it. He's a big movie star. Dirty Harry, after all. And he wants my woman. She laughed. And how do you know I don't like him? Because you're in my suite, in my bed. Excited again, she said, turning toward me. Did I ever tell you about the 3 things I haven't done yet? What? 3 things. You know, those 3 things are meant just for me and him and nobody else. We'd always know that. What are they? Tell me, I gasped, feeling the moment as she slowly leaned down toward me. You'll only find out when we're married. How on earth was I going to focus on my second novel before our honeymoon?
What's up, story lovers? This is the Story Guy, and if you're hungry for crazy tales and mind-blowing narratives, you've come to the right place. Don't forget to smash that subscribe button so you don't miss out on our weekly dose of crazy cheating stories, fun fiction and gut-ripping comedy from around the world. But that's not all. We also create our own original stories, and trust me, you won't find these anywhere else. Want even more spine-tingling reads? Head down to the description and grab our exclusive story collections. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.